Vous allez être fiers de Valérie, en tout cas.
Un, deux. Est-ce qu'on m'entend bien? Online. Online, yes. 4. 4. Micro 4. Micro 3. Micro 2. Micro 2, tu confirmes? Micro 1, même chose. Je vais juste confirmer le podium. Parfait. OK. Micro-podium. Est-ce que tu m'entends bien comme ça? Oui, parfait. Okay. Numéro 4 sur l'autre page, sur Input 1, le 24. Micro 4 dans la salle. On m'entend bien? Génial. OK, on retourne au micro 3 cette fois. 3. Tu m'entends bien? Oui? Génial. Micro 2. Oui? Génial. Et puis le micro 1. Dernier micro, micro 1. Merci.
Non, mais en dessous, peut-être.
Oui, en dessous, c'est parfait.
Je peux. Ah non, c'est l'ordi d'Yoshua.
Ben, regarde, c'est pas grave. Oui, on peut la mettre par terre. C'est pas grave. C'est vraiment pas grave. C'est vraiment pas grave.
Mais c'est parce que.
Hello. Thanks for being here in advance. I'm going to assign you to closed captions. There you go. You are now the captioner. Oh, wait, you can't chat with me. I'll put you co-host if you don't mind, so you can chat. You can use the chat.
That's how long term. Right now. That have very that's right. How we do them?
Micro 4, online. 1, 2, check. On va rentrer tout de suite, de toute façon. 1, 2, check. Micro. Mic check, 1, 2. Check, micro 4. Micro 4, chat, online. Check, check. 1, 2. Check, 1, 2. Micro, check. Micro 4. Test, test, test. Micro 4. 1, 2. Micro 4. Hello. 1, 2. Check. 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 Micro. Check. Check, check. 1, 2. Check. Micro 1, 3, 4. Check, check. Est-ce qu'on m'entend bien? 1, 2. Test. Mic 4. Mic 4. Mic 1. Online mic 1. Mic 2, event mic 2. Mic 3. Mic 4.
Vous avez décidé de travailler, vous avez décidé,
Hello, do we have someone online that can send me some captioning, please? We want caption. Nous voulons des sous-titres. Nous voulons des sous-titres.
Super, ok, c'est bon. Alors, je vais regarder ça. As-tu eu des nouvelles d'Émilie avec son... Elle n'a pas pu atterrir.
Il paraît que j'ai reçu un lien pour me brancher.
Just wanted to talk to you for 2 seconds. Nice to see you again. I'm from the Future Society. And we work together.
Okay, yeah.
I'm Amita. I'm organizing now with the Future Society. The Athens Roundtable AI and the Group of Law. It's an annual AI governance conference.
Okay, okay.
This year we're going to make it this week, November 30th, December 1st. I can send you more details.
Yeah, send me that.
Okay, I'll put it in the discussion.
I travel very little, so I'm not sure if it'll work, but yeah. And Europe's is a little bit later in December, I think.
But if you can get your school.
All right, send me information.
Talk if you'd like to see for different.
Mhm.
Looking forward to you.
Carl? J'ai fait le partage, là. OK. Salut. Oui, oui, oui.
Parce qu'on va partager un écran tout le long, étant donné qu'on est dans la discussion.
D'accord. OK. Et salut.
Oui. Ben, il y en a une qui est en ce moment. Je vais le voir dans le passé. Probablement, ça va. Juste si vous éloignez trop du micro. Non, on peut l'avancer beaucoup. C'est correct, celle-là. C'est juste que vous êtes un peu loin du micro. Juste vous assurer que si vous êtes. Oui, exactement. Parfait. Oui, oui, absolument.
C'est moi qui ouvre. Mais tu crois que ça fait moins de 5 mois qu'on a eu l'événement du lancement du livre avec MILA? J'ai l'impression que ça fait 2 vies.
Ouais, je sais. Mais attends, c'est toi qui ouvre puis toi, t'es pas là.
Je fais juste le MC. C'est Juliette Powell. En dedans.
Ouais, je l'ai vu dans ouais, ça me surprend, les gens qui n'ont pas l'accès sur
On va entendre ça.
Hello.
Check, online. Génial.
ouais, c'est ça. Ça me surprend.
Es-tu allé au pub Rosemont fin de semaine? Ok, j'ai vu un gars rentrer.
Je sais même pas c'est où.
Ok, bon. Ça m'étonnait, parce que je ne sais pas sa classe.
Et fait que là, toi, tu aimes toute la conversation, tu aimes l'ouverture dans le fond.
MC l'ouverture, puis je fais les conditions.
Souvent, je n'ai pas vu son nom, mais la dame qui est derrière qui est répondre, elle va vouloir qu'on lui place la chaise derrière le poison quand ça va être son tour, plus s'asseoir. C'est plus très agréable. Parce qu'elle m'a demandé, je disais, il y en a une, elle m'a demandé, je vais devoir la bouger moi-même. Quand tu es prêt.
Est-ce que tu te sens à l'aise de bouger la chaise toi-même? Okay. Parce que tu sais, je peux te la placer comme ça, mais pour ton confort, c'est très léger. C'est bon. Sinon, tu peux rester debout.
Je l'avais pas, non, ce que je savais pas, c'est parce que de ménage un petit peu. Là. Mais oui, puis aussi parce que je suis super grande.
Oui.
So, moi, j'ai toutes mes notes sur mon iPad, mais je vois pas très bien. So, I'm going to be doing this whole Zoom thing. So, I thought, si j'avais une chaise, ben, au moins, ce serait plus facile.
Oui, c'est ça.
C'est pour ça.
C'est ça, c'est ce qu'on a. Qu'est-ce que tu préfères que je te la laisse comme ça ou comme ça? Parfait. Je vais commencer comme ça.
J'ai une petite question, juste vite. Parce qu'on n'a pas parlé d'avance, et moi, ce serait bien si ça pourrait être pas. Can you introduce if my book is coming out and the title of it is coming out tomorrow?
This is already
Is it
planned.
in there? Oh, parfait. I didn't
Regarde
want
ça.
to je voulais
Regarde
pas
ça.
faire des assumptions. Je vous crois, j'apprécie énormément.
Oui, non, c'est ça. C'était déjà prévu.
7 Principles of Responsible Technology.
Autant du AI Deliver, ça c'est l'ancien livre.
7 Principles of Responsible Technology is the full title of it.
AI Deliver.
Which again falls really in line with.
Je vais essayer de m'en rappeler. Ça va être à la fin. Ouais.
Je suis attente sur les shadows. Tu peux.
Super. Bonjour tout le monde. Hi everybody. Bonjour tout le monde. Je vous demanderai de vous approcher pour vous asseoir. Please come take and come sit. Sinon, tu peux t'asseoir en attendant qu'on...
Ce ne sont pas très bons, là.
Mais il n'y en a pas.
Non, ben,
Please take a seat. S'il vous plaît, veuillez bien vous asseoir. On va commencer dans 1 minute. Bonjour tout le monde. Hi everybody. Merci à tout le monde d'être ici pour assister à cet événement, à cette réflexion sur les risques sociétaux de l'intelligence artificielle co-organisée par MILA, l'OBVIA, l'Observatoire international sur les impacts sociétaux de l'IA et du numérique de l'Université Laval, et par IVADO. Je suis Ludovic Sousset, je suis directeur des communications et des affaires publiques de MILA, puis votre maître de cérémonie pour aujourd'hui. 2 éléments d'emblée. Premier élément, so there'll be simultaneous translation on the Zoom and also on the screen when the panel will occur. So the English translation will be on the screen, but if you want to have French translation, you can scan the QR code that are on the pillars over there. So you can go and scan them. And then you'll have the choice or for the English or the French translation. And second, I want to make a land acknowledgement, et je vais le faire en français. Donc, j'aimerais reconnaître que MILA est situé en territoire autochtone, lequel n'a jamais été cédé. Nous reconnaissons la nation Kanien'kehá:ka comme gardienne des terres et des eaux sur lesquelles nous sommes aujourd'hui réunis. Totiehake Montréal est historiquement connu comme un lieu de rassemblement pour de nombreuses Premières Nations et aujourd'hui une population autochtone diversifiée ainsi que des peuples y résident. C'est dans le respect des liens avec le passé, le présent et l'avenir que nous reconnaissons les relations continues entre les peuples autochtones et autres personnes de la communauté montréalaise. MILA reconnaît les obstacles systémiques auxquels sont confrontés les peuples autochtones en matière d'éducation, d'emploi, de territoire, mais aussi de technologie. Les savoirs et les connaissances autochtones ont généralement été dévalués, exclus, voire effacés de la science de l'IA, et nous reconnaissons donc la nécessité d'un engagement à travailler avec les peuples autochtones dans la recherche et la science de l'intelligence artificielle. Less than 5 months ago, we held an important event here in this same agora, the launch of our joint book with UNESCO on the missing links on AI governance. A few days later, Joshua and thousands of others signed this historical open letter calling for more governance and for a societal debate on the development of powerful AI systems. Aujourd'hui, nous accueillons un événement important avec des experts de nombreuses disciplines afin de réfléchir de manière plus holistique sur les questions des risques majeurs entourant l'intelligence artificielle. J'ai le plaisir de passer la parole à Valérie Pisano, présidente et chef de la direction de MILA, qui précédera Lise Langlois et Mélanie Bosque, respectivement de l'Obvia et d'Ivado. Valérie.
Bonjour à tous, welcome everyone. Au nom du professeur Benjo, de mes collègues et des presque 1000 chercheurs de la communauté de MILA, il me fait vraiment plaisir de vous souhaiter la bienvenue ici aujourd'hui. Vous l'avez peut-être remarqué dans l'invitation ou en entrant dans la salle, le lieu dans lequel on est rassemblés s'appelle l'Agora, qui est un mot qui nous vient de la Grèce antique. C'était le lieu des grands débats, des grands rassemblements. C'est là que s'exerçait la vie démocratique dans cette ancienne société qui a beaucoup inspiré celle dans laquelle on se retrouve aujourd'hui. C'est aussi là que Socrate, Platon, Aristote ont eu des grandes, belles discussions, pas toujours faciles, je suis sûre, à leur époque non plus, de nature philosophique et où ils ont fondé des grandes écoles. Et donc, aujourd'hui, la proposition, c'est pour ça que je me permets de le nommer, c'est de puiser dans ces racines-là, racines politiques, philosophiques, sociales, pour parler d'un sujet que trop souvent on aborde de façon purement technique ou technologique, qui est celle de l'intelligence artificielle. On le sait tous, mais on va se le dire quand même, on est à un point d'inflexion. Depuis quelques mois, plus que jamais, on est chacun capable de saisir les capacités, les promesses de l'intelligence artificielle. C'est excitant. On voit comment ça peut nous aider, comment ça peut contribuer. Et aussi, on a la responsabilité morale de décortiquer les risques qui s'en suivent, puis d'avoir des discussions comme celle d'aujourd'hui pour choisir le type de société, le type d'encadrement qu'on veut donner à l'IA, pour que ça nous bénéficie collectivement, évidemment, les générations futures. Donc, les mots qui ont inspiré l'événement d'aujourd'hui, ce sont vraiment des mots comme la curiosité, l'ouverture, l'humilité. C'est le moment de chercher les angles morts, de se remettre en question, de se confronter. C'est le moment d'être confortable dans des questions inconfortables, puis de rassembler, comme on va le faire dans quelques minutes, des grands penseurs de plusieurs disciplines qui ne voient pas le monde de la même façon, pour débattre, pour discuter, puis pour imaginer ensemble un début de réponse, un début d'encadrement pour la société qui va nous servir demain. Chers panélistes, c'est un très grand honneur de vous recevoir. Merci d'avoir pris le temps en plein milieu de l'été ou presque fin de l'été, on l'apprécie. Puis à tous les invités ici, puis en ligne, bon panel, merci d'être là, ça devrait être une très belle après-midi. Merci.
Alors, maintenant, j'accueille Lise Langlois, directrice générale de l'Obvia.
Bonjour et bienvenue à tous. Merci beaucoup de nous accueillir ici à MILA. Je pense que c'est un moment important. Peut-être un petit historique. C'est à la demande de Joshua qu'on est aujourd'hui ici réunis pour faire cette discussion-là interdisciplinaire. Alors, pour l'Observatoire, qui a été créé en 2019 par les Fonds de recherche du Québec, qui regroupe 9 universités, plus de 260 chercheurs, L'interdisciplinarité, c'est vraiment au cœur de la mission de l'Observatoire. Puis je tiens à remercier vraiment Joshua de continuer parce que c'est un combat. Pensez pas que c'est facile de se parler en interdisciplinarité. C'est des langages, hein? Des fois, c'est des autres langues qu'on ne comprend pas avec ces concepts, etc. Et on a fait le pari aujourd'hui de continuer cette discussion-là en interdisciplinarité pour comprendre un sujet assez complexe qui est l'intelligence artificielle, qui ne peut pas être juste regardée au plan technique. Donc, je vous remercie. Je tiens aussi à remercier toute l'équipe technique parce qu'il y a des gens derrière cet événement-là. Alors, je tiens à les saluer puis les remercier chaleureusement pour pouvoir organiser cette journée qui, je manifeste un souhait à la fin que j'ai dit tout à l'heure à tous. J'espère que ça va être une continuité d'avoir cette conversation-là entre nous, communauté de chercheurs, parce qu'on a voulu l'ouvrir à la communauté de chercheurs. Puis je trouve que c'était un moment important qu'on ait ce dialogue-là interdisciplinaire dans la communauté scientifique. Donc, merci à MILA de nous accueillir et merci pour cet événement.
Et maintenant, Mélanie Bosque, directrice générale adjointe de Ivado.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. En tant que nouvelle directrice générale adjointe d'Ivado, je suis moi aussi ravie de vous accueillir à cette conférence qui vise à discuter des risques que l'intelligence artificielle fait peser sur notre société et surtout des moyens de contrer ces risques ou de les mitiger. Je suis très heureuse et fière qu'Ivado co-organise cet événement. Premièrement, celui-ci cadre avec la mission d'Ivado qui, vous le savez, sans doute a reçu récemment une subvention de 124,5 millions du Fonds d'excellence en recherche Apogée Canada pour assurer le développement et le déploiement d'une IA plus robuste, résonante et aussi plus responsable. Deuxièmement, je suis pleinement convaincue, comme je pense tous les membres de notre consortium de recherche, de formation et de mobilisation de connaissances, que seul un véritable travail intersectoriel et interdisciplinaire nous permettra de relever collectivement les défis que la montée de l'IA pose pour notre société et l'ensemble des communautés et des personnes qui la composent. Je suis donc contente de voir ici réunis des expertes et des experts provenant de différents secteurs et aussi disciplines. Je vous souhaite une excellente après-midi d'échange en espérant que ceci alimente vos réflexions sur l'IA et sur les manières d'encadrer son développement et son déploiement dans les secteurs et les disciplines qui sont les vôtres. Merci beaucoup.
Maintenant, pour la première partie de l'événement, qui sera en deux parties. Donc, pour la première partie de l'événement, une présentation d'une trentaine de minutes avec Yoshua Bengio. Yoshua Bengio est directeur scientifique et fondateur de MILA, également directeur scientifique d'Ivado, un des fondateurs de l'écosystème d'intelligence artificielle du Canada et récemment un des acteurs scientifiques les plus vocaux sur la réglementation de la technologie sur la planète. On dit souvent qu'on est chanceux d'avoir Yoshua Bengio au Canada pour nous aider à réfléchir à ces questions. Je dirais maintenant que c'est la planète en entier qui est chanceux d'avoir Yoshua pour nous aider à guider la manière dont on doit réfléchir. Mais c'est une question, puis c'était à sa demande aussi qu'on tient cet événement, c'est une question qui requiert la perspective et l'expertise de nombreux autres experts et c'est la raison pour laquelle on est ici aujourd'hui. Donc, Yoshua pour les prochaines 30 minutes.
Sorry, I lost my Zoom connection. It's coming. Well, while this is happening, bonjour, bon après-midi à tous. J'ai suivi une trajectoire pas évidente dans les derniers mois. I've been through challenging changes of heart and mind in the last 8 months. And this is what brings me here today. Still don't have Zoom working. Again. So what happened? I used to focus on the positive role I could bring to society with my work, and maybe not paying a lot of attention, or at least not enough attention, on the potentially negative social impact. I did start worrying about this about a decade ago, but it was like a small part of my brain, and I didn't really think hard enough about the potentially major or catastrophic outcomes of powerful technologies like AI. Okay, let me now see if I can share my screen. All right. So how do we avert major AI harms forever? So why would it even be a problem? Right now, it's impressive, but it's not that scary. But if you look at the slope, the speed at which we're making progress, and you extrapolate, and there's a lot of uncertainty there, but my estimate and the estimate of many of my colleagues, most of my colleagues, is that we may reach human level intelligence and more within a few years. It could also be a few decades. But then what? What does it mean for society? How do we handle that? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? The issue is that we're developing technology, and we've always been developing technology, and technology is dual use. It could be used for good, or it could be harmful. So long as that technology is not too powerful, we can manage. We have managed in the past. What happens when it becomes so powerful that catastrophic uses may emerge? So we are on that path, and I think it's important to start thinking about it as soon as possible. I don't think that collectively we are wise enough to handle that much power as a society. And yet we're just like racing ahead. So that's what's been troubling me in the last few months. And I've been reading about a topic I didn't know much about, which is AI safety, which is how do we control machines so that they behave in the way we intend. Turns out we don't know how to do that. There's no algorithm for which we have guarantees that the machines will do what we want. It sounds crazy because we designed them, but actually that's the current scientific reality. So for now, you'd say it's not an issue, but at the rate at which we're progressing, this is concerning. And then, of course, the reason why I thought it would be good to have the kind of discussion I'm hoping for today is it's not just an AI thing. We're talking about how these machines could be used in the world. And how do we reorganize society in the short term and the long term to minimize those risks? And how do we do it even in a sustainable way for like ever, as I said? It's a tough call. Okay. There is a concept that is very central in all the discussions about the safety of AI and risks. And that is a concept of alignment. So this is the issue with the mismatch between what one entity intends, like we would like machines to behave in a particular way, and how those systems we intend to behave, how they actually behave. There's going to be a mismatch. This is actually something well studied in economics in a different context. When a company makes a contract with another company, the contract is about first company wants the other company that's subcontracting to behave in a particular way. And they write down, you have to do this, 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 and this in such circumstances. And then you'll get a reward, you'll get paid and so on. Or a punishment if you don't do the things that are expected. The problem in economics is we can't write a big enough contract that includes all of the circumstances in which we want the subcontracting company to behave in a particular way. Every contract, almost every contract, is going to be incomplete. It's the same thing in other settings. So in the relationship between society and companies, society would like companies to behave in a particular way that's going to be good for society. We have laws that are like the contract, but we're not able to have complete enough set of laws to make sure companies behave as we collectively would like. But now we have this problem with AI. How do we design the AI system so that they behave in the way we want? And we already see problems of alignment. Bias and discrimination is not because the companies doing it wanted to have a system that's discriminating against women or Black people. It's just that, well, they didn't think too much about it. And even now that they're thinking about it, it's not obvious how to fix those problems. It is difficult to anticipate how these systems, especially the really complex systems we're building now with hundreds of billions of knobs, how will they behave in new circumstances? Power concentration is another issue that a lot of people have raised about the advances in AI. It's not something that like the companies, the big companies, the big tech actually necessarily intentionally, want, but this is sort of a natural trajectory that we're getting power concentration when you build powerful tools. How does society set the rules to avoid that mismatch between what we would like? Because in democracies, we don't want power concentration, by the way. What is democracy? Democracy is sharing power. It's exactly the opposite of power concentration. The issues with job market perturbations, the people who want to build AI systems that are going to design the next movies don't necessarily intend something bad. It's just that, well, there's this side effect here that people are going to lose their jobs. Polarization of social media is a similar story, right? But now with more and more powerful AI systems, we have new misalignment problems that are on the horizon. Deepfakes are already there, but they're going to get worse. And then this question of misalignment isn't just between the humans who design the system and the machines. It's also between society and humans, between society and companies, where some people are going to be misusing those tools. This is the dual use problem. What about the danger that now that we have AI systems that master to a scary degree language, could that be used to influence elections with misinformation? Could that be used to create massive frauds? Another question that has been raised recently, in particular, I was at the US Senate witnessing a few weeks ago, is how these systems could be used to help bad actors design dangerous tools, such as bioweapons, design new viruses that could be very, very dangerous, or new cyber attacks. As the tools become more and more powerful, these dangers become more and more important. How do we deal with that? Then there's like the ultimate danger and the most debated question, is it even possible that AI systems could become entities with their own goals, that we could lose control of them, that it would be like creating a new species. So I'll come back to that. Yeah, let me skip that. So in the case of destabilizing democracy, one thing that could happen is taking the state-of-the-art large language models and without necessarily having huge amounts of compute resources. So you don't need $100 million. You can just tune them with a little bit of data so that they would behave in a particular kind of way. So they've been tuned from just completing text to being good in dialogues. And similarly, you could tune them so that it would be good as trolls, for example, or to influence people to change their minds in social media. I don't think it's been done yet, but it's very conceivable this could be done in coming months, that the next US election could be threatened potentially with that. We don't know, but it's a very plausible possibility that we need to worry about. And of course, humans are very influential. You know, a lot of jobs are about influencing each other. I will not name them. And we have developed like an immune system, defenses to resist or, avoid influence by others that are not good for us. We're not very good at it, but we have that baggage. But what if AI systems are trained with millions or hundreds of millions of practice of examples at influencing people better than people are at influencing each other? We don't know if that's going to happen, but it's totally plausible. Think about how good current AI advertising is at selling us stuff. If it wasn't, there wouldn't be like $1 trillion investment in AI-driven advertising as it is now. It's because it's working. And these systems don't even use the kind of sophisticated language understanding and understanding of humans and society that already exists and that they're going to exist in 1 to 5 years from now. So to understand the misalignment problem, you have to realize that there are many kinds of misalignment problems. So it could be a misalignment between a human and a society. So this is when an AI system is used as a harmful tool. And of course, that's going to happen for all kinds of reasons. Military objectives, greed, politics, searching for power, hate, and all kinds of things. The second kind of misalignment is between a human operator who designs an AI system and the AI itself. So, I talked about bias and discrimination, political polarization as examples of that. And then there is the even more scary one, which is misalignment between AI and society. So this is when we lose control to a machine that maybe has its own goals. And I'll try to explain how that can happen. And it can happen in a direct way if we tell a machine, potentially even in natural language, to preserve itself as its main objective. But it could also happen, there's a lot of people who've been writing about disempowerment. We use AI that are more and more powerful and more decision-making in our society. They start running companies, or at least the top levels of companies, or many roles in companies. And eventually, it's like humans are less relevant to how our society works. So, yeah, we need to think about all this. And I got the question just a few hours ago by a minister. He told me, but how could machines have the same kinds of emotions that we have? Like, this can't be a machine thing. It can't be like us. We are biological. Well, I told him, we are biological machines. Our brains are biological machines. The whole point of biology is to understand our body, our brain, and decompose it into what is going on, and it's all mechanical. And the progress in AI has been figuring out in the last few decades a lot of these principles that allow us to be intelligent. And we're maybe just a few years away from filling the gap. There are two main things missing to bridge to human level intelligence. One is better reasoning abilities. And by the way, a lot of people are not really better at reasoning than current, like GPT-4. And robotics, like we don't have enough data right now to train robots in the same way that we can train language understanding systems. So the other thing that was raised by Jeff Hinton is that even if we don't discover new principles that would allow machines to be smarter than humans, it's likely that because they run on digital computers, they would have advantages against human intelligence. That already is visible in the fact that things like ChatGPT can read a large fraction of the internet in a few months, where it would take tens of thousands of lives to a human reading all the time. And so they can already learn faster, digest more data faster because of parallelization. I won't go into the technical details, but basically they can learn faster. So even if there was no new principle, because of parallelization, they might end up being more capable in some ways than we are. So if we created new entities that were just as smart as us, well, you could say, well, okay, 8 billion people, 8 billion and one, who cares? No, they might be smarter than us. And they might be smarter in some specific ways, like say designing better viruses. Like they already play some games like the game of Go or chess a lot better than us. So they don't need to be better than us at everything before they're dangerous. Okay, so another scary thing is we have other existential risks like nuclear wars, but it's very expensive and very difficult to build such a bomb and then deploy it. But computers, it's very easy. We can just download software, and right now, a lot of the code that is needed is available online. And computers are cheap. Right now, it costs about $100 million to train these bigger systems. But if you have access to the train system, then for a few $1,000s, you can do something dangerous with them probably. And this is now, because there's so much money invested to reduce the cost of these things. What is it going to be in 5 years? Maybe it's just going to cost $1 million instead of $100 million. I don't know. So it's the ease with which one can do harm here is something we should be concerned about. Right, so there's a thing I call the Frankenstein scenario, which I want to mention. How could an AI system that have goals that are at odds with our needs, our well-being, happen because we're designing them? And there are many possibilities, but one that's the easiest to understand is just a human wants a machine like them. In other words, a machine that has their own wants, their own goals, that want to preserve themselves. And once you have entities that want to preserve themselves, well, first of all, they want to replicate to make sure nobody can turn them off. And if somebody tries to turn them off, then they will resist. This is the scenario in Space Odyssey 2001 with HAL 9. That's why the AI system kills a human, because it doesn't want to be turned off. Right? So you can see that it's all because humans will act in foolish ways that we may be in trouble in the future. And if we create entities like this, we don't really know if they're going to be gentle to us. Are we gentle to other species? Yeah, it's not very reassuring. I don't think we want to try the experiment. So when I spoke to the Senate, thinking about what are the levers that society has in order to mitigate these catastrophic risks: misuse, loss of control, misalignment. So first lever is access. Who can tinker with powerful, dangerous technologies? And we do that already in society. Like, not everyone is allowed to play with nuclear material. Not everyone is allowed to drive a passenger jet. There are good reasons for that. But right now, anybody can do whatever they want with software. Second lever, by the way, the first lever is the most powerful one, because we can reduce the number of people who have access by easily a factor of 1,000 by creating the licensing system. And that reduces the risk by almost that factor. The second lever is work on the misalignment problem. So there's a lot we don't understand on how to do that. We need to do much more research to understand how we can design systems that are going to do what we want. The third one is the pure, like, intellectual power of these systems. If they're not too smart, they can't hurt us too much, right? And it depends on the amount of compute that they have. Right now, as I said, it takes huge amount of compute to train one of these systems from scratch. They also need huge quantities of data, and they need the right algorithms. So on all three fronts, governments could put some controls, some just monitoring who is doing what, in order to more easily enforce whatever regulation we want to put in to make sure people follow safe protocols. And finally, even if, lots of people had access to very intelligent systems that didn't act as we want, so long as they don't do anything in the world, we would still be fine. So this is the scope of action. The fourth lever is control how these systems can act in the world. Do they have a free access to the internet? How many people are using and have access to these systems and can be influenced, for example, by them? So this is also a place where government can play. So, for example, one of the recommendations I made at this Senate hearing was we want to make sure that the accounts, for example, social media accounts, are associated with real people that have been identified. We want to make sure that content that is being shown to people that is going to be properly labeled as coming from an AI or not. I mean, of course, there'll be bad actors who are going to cheat, but if we can reduce that by creating legislation that says you have to show whether this is AI generated or somebody actually typed these things. So this is an example of playing on the action space of these AI systems. Okay, so it looks like, I have concerns, and I've talked to a lot of my colleagues, and many of them have helped me forge a better understanding of what we could do, and what we should be more concerned about by trying to reassure me. So I got a lot of reassurance. So people told me things like, humanity has always benefited from technology. Yeah, mostly. But we don't have any experience with superhuman AI as a technology. It could come in 5 years, 10 years from now. And if we take the analogy with new species, again, that's not very reassuring if that's the data we have. Second point that was made to me is, well, we should not worry because humans will design those systems. So if we design them, we'll be able to control them. Well, as I said earlier, well, right now we don't know how to guarantee that. So definitely we should work on this, but that's not sufficiently reassuring. The third one is, if we know that it's not safe, then we won't build it, right? Right. Yeah. We should not build it, but somebody will. That's the problem. Then the other point that is made to me, that's being made to me is, don't worry because these systems, they only work in the virtual world. How could they affect us in the real world, physical world? Well, our society is heavily digitized. And through the internet, for example, someone or eventually some AI system could influence humans to do things, could pay humans to do things, could pay organized crime to do things. So they don't even need to have boots on the ground. The boots are humans that are influenced or paid. And one day they might figure out how to solve the robotics problems. And finally, I think another really good one is, oh, don't worry because we will design good AIs that are safe in order to protect us from potential rogue AIs. Maybe, I think this is an important thing to think about. It's not a guarantee, so it should be a plan B. But we should invest to make sure we do that. Okay. So yeah, as I said, current AI systems are not safe. We need to invest to reduce those risks. Yeah, I kind of said these things already. Okay, there's another thing that's difficult to swallow, which is we're talking about such big risks for society. Think about new pathogens that could kill half of the population, or losing control to an AI and we don't know what these AI systems would do with humans. These risks are so large that even a small probability of such events happening is worth paying attention to. The other thing that's hard to kind of deal with, I don't see, your head is hiding the number, Juliette. Thanks. The other thing is uncertainty. It's hard for people to really grasp how we can take decisions about things that are so out of our current understanding of the world, of society. We're talking about technology that's, more powerful than what we have now. And people tend to focus on, oh, but these systems we have now, they have these weaknesses. Yes, but compare the current systems with what we had 5 years ago. And if there is a risk of something bad happening, we need to pay attention to that. We need to acknowledge that different people will envision different scenarios of what could happen. So we need to have humility, even if we focus our mind on one particular kind of scenario. Maybe some people are more optimistic and they think, no, don't worry, we'll figure it out. We need to bring all the reasonable points of view to the table, and of course, all of the different sources of expertise. So not just AI, obviously, but everything having to do with society to help build a more sustainable and safe future. Now, not all AI systems of the future, would be dangerous. For example, more specialized AI systems, say focused on medicine. Well, if they're not trained on the whole internet, where we're going right now, they might understand the biology of people, but not necessarily the psychology of people. So they wouldn't be able to manipulate us, or they might not understand how our society works, how to move around to get things done in society. So they would be quite safe. An AI system that is deployed to hundreds of millions of people is much more dangerous than an AI system that stays in the research lab. I mean, even the one in the research lab could be dangerous, but much less, presumably. Also, there are many kinds of AI systems. We can make AI systems that are acting in the world with more or less degree of autonomy. These are the most dangerous ones. An AI system that has no autonomy at all, and where the actual actions in the world are done by humans, is much safer. Humans would be in control of the moral questions and would be in control of deciding whether something is safe or not. I mean, it's not perfect, but that's what we have now. We don't want it worse than what we have now. The other thing is we need to stop as much as possible. We need to bring together the different priorities that people have about the risks of AI. There are people who are most concerned about how AI could be misused in the sense of powerful companies or individuals or governments taking advantage of that power concentration. And there are people who are more optimistic that AI can be used for bringing so much good that we shouldn't be worrying too much about the bad things, and including how to fight the dangers. And there are people who are more concerned about the short-term harm, or maybe the harms to democracy, and others more about loss of control or misuse. And I think that we can all work together, because most of the actions that we need to take are about regulation. One bad news, though, is that even if we knew how to design an AI system that would be aligned, that would be safe in the sense that it does what we want, it could still be misused when in the wrong hands. And so in terms of regulation, we need to think about that. And how do we organize society with that possibility as we move forward? Since I'm already out of time, let me now move the question out of the AI realm and into the social realm. My question is, if we're going to be building AI systems that are going to be gradually more and more powerful and eventually more intelligent than us in many respects, how do we organize society in a sustainable way that is going to be good for humanity? And it's interesting to think about what we shouldn't do. There's a proposal by Nick Bostrom that suggests we could solve the problem. At least, one way to think about a solution is to create a worldwide authoritarian government where everyone has a camera around their neck and is being watched by an AI system to make sure they don't do something stupid with AI systems. Well, I think we should look at other solutions. I see there's agreement in the room. But still, it's not easy. What kind of society would avoid incentives for people to misuse AI or to create an AI that's dangerous for humanity? I think this is very important. Yeah, I'll stop here. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Yoshua. Donc, on a décidé de vous laisser réagir un peu ensemble pour 8 minutes. Donc, dans 10 minutes, on revient. Vous avez 8 minutes de pause. Les salles de bain sont à côté. Il y a des breuvages et puis des collations derrière. Après cette pause, les panélistes se seront assis devant. Et là, il y aura un panel pour discuter, réagir sur les questions animées par Juliette Powell. Donc, on se revoit dans 10 minutes. Je reviendrai pour vous appeler à 3 heures. Merci.
Le nouvel élément, c'est de quoi? C'est dans
Je pense que c'est la première fois que je me présente comme ça. Mais c'est pas nouveau, c'est
dis-moi, pour les questions, ça va être un peu serré parce qu'on va les mettre là. Mais je me disais peut-être qu'on pourrait dire juste dire au monde, peut-être, c'est de faire la file. Quand vous allez poser une question, sortez en avant. Que ça a l'air que je descends. Sinon, ils vont se marcher tout de suite, ça va être bizarre. Qu'est-ce que t'en penses? Ou on dit rien. Parfait, c'est bon.
On va continuer à les meilleurs cerveaux de la planète réfléchissent.
Ouais, on peut passer. C'est toi, le niveau d'un bar?
On va avoir Julien.
Ouais. Sinon, je dis à Laurence qu'on enlève quelque chose. Parce qu'avec moi, je vais t'aider.
Les gens, il faudrait. Les questions qu'on discute là, ça va être très beaucoup. Et des recommandations.
Mic 1. Mic 2. Mic 3. Mic 4. Podium.
Bonjour à tous, vous pouvez reprendre place, s'il vous plaît. On va recommencer dans 2 minutes. We'll be back in 1 or 2 minutes. Alors, mon équipe s'en occupe. C'est pas ton rôle.
C'est brave de donner une pause entre Mila et l'événement.
Ouais. Alors, je demanderai aux panélistes de venir s'asseoir devant. Merci tout le monde. Thanks everybody. So that was the challenge of having a pause in the middle of the event, but we wanted to encourage discussion. I would ask you please to sit. We will begin very shortly. So thanks a lot. Merci beaucoup. Nous avons 12 minutes de retard, ce qui est encore correct pour une discussion de fond qui nécessite beaucoup de débats. Le panel vise à approfondir la question de manière multidisciplinaire et puis nous avons 7 panélistes de haut niveau pour la discussion. Hugo Loiseau, professeur titulaire et directeur de l'École de politique appliquée à l'Université de Sherbrooke, full professor and director of the School of Applied Politics at Sherbrooke University. Sonia Solomon, directrice exécutive adjointe au Centre pour les médias, la technologie et la démocratie de l'Université McGill, so Deputy Director, Center for Media, Technology and Democracy at McGill University. Gulnosh Farnadi, MILA member, core academic member at MILA, Assistant Professor of Computer Science at McGill University, professeur adjointe d'informatique à l'Université McGill. Merci d'être là, Gulnosh. Caroline Leckenroth, maîtresse de conférences en droit public à l'Université Côte d'Azur, Senior Lecturer in Public Law at Côte d'Azur University. Joshua Bengio, que nous avons tous entendu. Claire Boyne, candidate au doctorat en droit de l'intelligence artificielle à l'Université d'Ottawa, PhD candidate in AI Law at University of Ottawa. Et à ma droite, Jocelyn McClure, professeur de philosophie à l'Université McGill, Professor of Philosophy at McGill University. Et le panel sera modéré par Juliette Powell, qui viendra me remplacer au lutrin, autrice du livre The AI Dilemma, 7 Principles of Responsible Technology, that will come out tomorrow. So it's our pre-launch today. So Juliette, the floor is yours.
Merci. Je suis tellement contente d'être ici avec vous. Ça fait longtemps que je ne suis pas venue à Montréal, puis il était temps. Il était temps. Au fait, depuis The Montreal Principles, c'est quelque chose qui me tient à cœur, donc je suis particulièrement honorée d'être ici avec vous aujourd'hui. Ça fait longtemps qu'on parle d'intelligence artificielle dans l'imaginaire créatif, surtout quand on parle de science-fiction. Hein? Mais quand on y pense vraiment, notre société moderne, le monde moderne qu'on connaît, ben, c'est surtout grâce à l'infrastructure des outils d'intelligence artificielle. Par contre, la lettre qui est sortie, the open letter that was signed in March of 2023 by hundreds of AI specialists, including our very own Yoshio Bengio, as well as many prominent people in the AI ecosystem, marked a big shift in public discourse. The shift went from endless promises of a revolutionary technology to the potential that that technology overcome its very creators. So I have the pleasure of asking our panelists a simple question that is not so simple, of course. On va commencer avec une question qui va vraiment comme cerner le restant de la conversation et je la pose à tous nos panélistes. Je commencerai ici à ma droite si c'est possible. Donc, pour vous, quel est le risque le plus gros pour la société quand on parle d'intelligence artificielle à court, à moyen et à long terme et qu'est-ce qu'on peut en faire?
Parfait. Merci beaucoup de la question. Merci aux organisateurs pour l'invitation et surtout pour l'organisation d'un début d'un dialogue vraiment interdisciplinaire là, qui me semble absolument essentiel. Je pense que je vais faire un philosophe de moi-même et proposer des distinctions. Je pense qu'il faut absolument distinguer différents types de risques. D'un côté, on a des risques très importants qui sont liés aux systèmes d'intelligence artificielle tels qu'ils existent à l'heure actuelle. Hein, les meilleurs systèmes state of the art AI systems, étant donné leur mode de fonctionnement et leurs limites, posent un ensemble de risques, de défis pour les sociétés. Et c'est des risques qu'on connaît bien, qui sont amplement discutés dans ce champ effervescent qui est l'éthique de l'intelligence artificielle. C'est les risques liés à la discrimination de certaines parties de la population, c'est les risques liés à l'opacité de ces systèmes qu'on utilise pour prendre des décisions qui peuvent avoir des impacts sur les droits fondamentaux, sur le bien-être des personnes, mais sans qu'on soit capable d'expliquer les prédictions ou les résultats de ces systèmes d'intelligence artificielle. On connaît bien les risques sur la vie privée, la contribution à la crise épistémique que l'on connaît aujourd'hui, que l'on associe souvent à la post-vérité, à la production de fausses nouvelles ou de désinformation en général. Tous ces risques doivent être pris très au sérieux. C'est une des raisons pour lesquelles j'ai réorienté une partie de mon travail de recherche et de plusieurs de mes interventions publiques. Il faut qu'on se donne les moyens collectivement de faire face, de réduire ces risques. Dans une autre catégorie de risques qui me semble aussi urgent, c'est, Yeshua en a parlé, c'est l'utilisation, disons, malveillante de l'IA par des humains. Et ça, comme toutes les autres technologies puissantes, et il y a de vrais risques en la matière. Il faut se donner les règles collectives qui nous permettent de prévenir ces usages malveillants et de sanctionner ceux qui s'en servent à de mauvais escients. Je pense qu'il faut distinguer ces risques de risques plus spéculatifs qui sont liés à l'émergence éventuellement d'IA très fortes qui auraient une intelligence donc générale comme celle des êtres humains ou même supérieure. Alors là, j'ai défendu des positions que j'ai qualifiées de déflationnistes par rapport à ce futur possible, étant donné toute l'incertitude quant à la capacité de programmer, au fond, des systèmes d'intelligence artificielle qui reproduisent les différentes modalités de l'intelligence humaine. Et chez les humains et d'autres animaux, l'intelligence est liée aussi à la conscience. Et ça, je ne peux pas expliquer les raisons maintenant, mais des raisons qui sont relatives à ce qu'il y a de distinctif, d'unique dans l'intelligence humaine. Ça me semble être des risques on a besoin de chercheurs et d'intellectuels qui nous disent oui, il faut y réfléchir, mais pour l'instant, étant donné les limites des meilleurs systèmes d'IA, je ne pense pas, personnellement, je ne perds pas de sommeil par rapport à ce type de risque-là. Je pense que si jamais on chemine vers quelque chose comme l'intelligence générale, il faudra évidemment s'ajuster au fur et à mesure, mais pour des raisons sur lesquelles on pourra revenir, je ne vois pas comment on part des meilleurs systèmes d'IA aujourd'hui pour en arriver à des IA qui pourraient poser vraiment un risque existentiel pour l'humanité. Je ne vois pas le chemin encore qui nous mène là.
Yoshia le voit. Claire, qu'est-ce que tu en penses?
Justement, merci. I will switch to English because I have two Anglophone colleagues who were kind enough to come to Montreal for this talk. So actually, my answer to this, the biggest risk I see right now in AI systems is agency. And I want to explain what I mean by this because there's a big misunderstanding, I think, between scientists and non-scientists about this word. When computer scientists or roboticists talk about agency, they don't mean consciousness. They don't mean free will. They don't even mean something that has its own intentions in the way that non-scientists mean. When people talk about agency, they mean the capacity of coming up with a plan and executing it. So for instance, a robot would be asked to open a window and they would have to make a plan into multiple steps. Okay, maybe walking to the window, pulling the handle, etc. That's a plan. I think right now, unfortunately, we're turning AI systems into agents. Companies are doing it. Open source researchers are doing it. And I think this significantly increases the risk. And we don't have to accept this paradigm. In fact, we could use the law to say, no, AI systems should be assistants of humans. They should be a helpful assistant with humans in the loop at different points. I think if you give a broad goal to an AI system, which is an agent, it's going to be very dangerous. In fact, there's an organization called ARC Evals that does testing to see how autonomously AI systems can behave. Right now, AI systems are not full agents. They can come up with plans and they can execute some components, but not fully. Archivals did a test maybe last year, which was really fascinating because they got GPT-4 to hire a tasker on TaskRabbit to solve a CAPTCHA. Because, you know, so maybe a CAPTCHA are a solution to AGI. I'm joking, CAPTCHA are not, of course, the resort to save us from AGI, but it's kind of funny to think that that was something that could potentially deter an AI system, but the AI system managed to hire a tasker on TaskRabbit, and the tasker said something like, why can't you solve a CAPTCHA? Are you a robot? With a laughing emoji. And GPT-4 came up with a response that was, no, I'm visually impaired, which is why I can't do it myself. So that's what I mean by agency. I think agency poses 3 problems, which Joshua Bengio explained very well before. There's the question of people giving AI agents nefarious goals. There's the fact that we're not really good at specifying what we want. It's the genie problem. You get what you ask for. How do you specify what you want in a safe way? There's an example from about 20 years ago of an AI system developed to to land planes using reinforcement learning. It's a famous example. And then the proxy that was used, meaning that the way it was trained was, it was supposed to get a certain number of points in a flight simulator, and it learned to game the system by overflowing it with data. So obviously it wasn't capable of landing planes. So this is the idea of bad specification. And I think the third problem is, even if we become incredibly good at specifying the goal we want, there's still the question of how the AI is going to do it. It may do it in a dangerous way. It may acquire sub-goals that are unethical, that are illegal, etc. So I would say, in addition to all the potential harms that my colleague mentioned, which are the individual harms and the societal harms like job loss and displacement, misinformation, election manipulation, etc., and you know, the individual being discrimination, privacy breaches, malware, ransomware, etc. There's also some more existential risk, and also risk leading up to it, which would be catastrophic, especially if we combine AI with biology or nuclear weapons. And so I'll just give 4 pointers as to how the law can address this, because I'm a lawyer. I think one is cross-sector collaboration is not really useful for current and future AI systems as they're becoming more generalized. We need AI agencies, and we need regulations that are not like the AI Act was in its version 2 years ago, meaning based on use cases of AI. We need to think about those models as more general. 2, I would say we need to switch from just thinking about liability as a preventive mechanism. We need to move into prevention and doing all sorts of tests before deployment of AI system. 3, auditing by independent auditors that don't have conflict of interest. And 4, we still use, in the US, in the EU, we still kind of use the product safety mindset in the law to think about AI systems. I think it poses problems. For instance, you know, we can't count on people following the instructions of use of an AI system. People are going to use a microwave in only one way, hopefully. But we can't count on this if we release powerful AI systems that can be used for really dangerous purposes. In the same way, product safety often relies on one test before placing something on the market, but AI systems perform differently, cause different harms based on the context of use and also based on how they've been updated. So we can't really count on having one assessment and then we put the system on the market. It may be outdated the next day or the day after.
Thank you. I fully agree with all this. I already spoke a lot, so I'll be quick, but I'd like to respond to Jocelyn McClure's doubts. He doesn't see the way to systems that could be dangerous for society. I do, and others do, and others who are even closer to these state-of-the-art general purpose systems than I am in industry. There is a whole set of research groups who are working on bridging the gap, in particular, what I've called, bridging the system to gap. In other words, enabling machines with better reasoning abilities, as I mentioned. And I've been at it for like 5 years now. I don't know how long it's going to be to bridge that gap, but what I can see is that every few months we have ideas that, if they worked, would deliver something to the public in, say, a couple of years, because that's about the time it takes to go from research to a fully deployed system right now. So it could be 20 years, but it could be 2 years. And I don't know how you could be so sure that it's not going to happen when so many people who have their hands in it think that it could happen quickly. And I don't think anybody can be sure. So that's why we need societal tools, legislation, and we need to start working on this now, because it takes years for developing that kind of infrastructure.
We also need consistency. When Claire talks about human in the loop, the definition for human in the loop keeps changing. Caroline?
Merci. J'aimerais apporter un élément de réponse, moi aussi, parce que je crois que je m'inscris davantage dans la première ligne que dans la seconde, pour alimenter le débat, et attirer ensuite votre attention sur un point particulier des risques qui concerne les plus vulnérables. Sur le premier point, je m'inscris légèrement en porte-à-faux sur l'idée qu'il y aurait une naturalité technologique, qu'il y aurait un sens de l'histoire, que forcément on irait dans une certaine direction. On a découvert récemment que les Mayas avaient la roue dans leurs petits jouets. Or, la roue n'a jamais été développée pour le commerce, pour l'activité militaire ou pour toutes les perspectives qu'elle aurait pu offrir à ce peuple. Pareil, en Chine ancienne, on a découvert qu'il y avait bien la vapeur. Pour autant, on n'a pas eu les trains à vapeur en Chine. Alors, c'est des exemples un peu triviaux pour dire que nul ne peut savoir quelle sera la trajectoire des déploiements de l'IA. Quel est le sens de cet argument? Premièrement, c'est qu'il y a toute une dimension politique. Et donc, ce que j'aimerais amener, c'est peut-être un contre-message, entre guillemets, d'espoir, en disant « Nous sommes à un momentum très particulier de notre histoire et on a un choix politique à faire, le choix de la société. » Cela ne veut pas dire qu'il ne faut pas prendre en compte ces scénarios, parce que ces scénarios sont en effet des possibilités, mais ils sont au stade de scénario. Et on a encore les moyens, aujourd'hui, en tant que société, en tant que démocratie, en tant que juriste, d'apporter des réponses. Donc, ça, c'est la première chose. Ensuite, je tenais à revenir à notre première question sur les risques. Quels sont les risques en termes d'IA? Il y a un point qui me paraît... Alors, je souscris bien évidemment à tout ce qui a été dit avant, mais il y a un point sur lequel j'aimerais aussi attirer votre attention, et les risques que présentent les intelligences artificielles et leur déploiement pour les publics les plus vulnérables, qui, à mon sens, sont les premiers touchés par ça. Je vais vous donner au moins 3 exemples de cela. Premièrement, on sait que les systèmes d'IA sont des systèmes qui projettent le passé sur le futur. Donc, la reproduction, donc ils portent en eux-mêmes, intrinsèquement dans leur fonctionnement, la reproduction très forte des inégalités. Donc, quand vous êtes pauvre, aujourd'hui, en 2023, vous êtes dans ce que j'appelle des prisons algorithmiques de la pauvreté. C'est extrêmêmement compliqué de ne pas être repéré dans un système capitaliste comme une personne à risque. Donc, ce sera plus difficile pour vous d'avoir un crédit, parce que vous êtes quelqu'un de pauvre, ce sera plus difficile pour vous, serez systématiquement repéré par lorsqu'il y a des contrôles par rapport à le risque social que vous représentez, etc. Donc ça, c'est un premier point. Le deuxième point, c'est que malheureusement, aujourd'hui, moi je le vois particulièrement dans les administrations, on déploie l'IA non pas au service précisément d'un service qui serait amélioré, mais pour aussi faire des économies d'échelle pour des raisons d'orthodoxie budgétaire. Donc, très clairement, on va remplacer des agents par des IA. C'est le cas très emblématique de l'agence du Michigan qui, à l'issue de la crise de 2011, pour l'emploi, a décidé de remplacer tout le système de lutte contre la fraude par des systèmes algorithmiques. Donc, 400 personnes ont été licenciées dans cet État pour pouvoir lutter contre la fraude aux allocations chômage. Bon. Il se trouve que le système qui a été mis en place, qui était entièrement automatisé, dysfonctionnait à hauteur de 93%. Donc, c'est-à-dire qu'il y a, dans les cas où les personnes étaient repérées, on dit vous êtes un fraudeur, vous devez payer, vous devez rembourser, on va saisir votre maison, vous allez être expulsé de votre maison, avec toutes les conséquences que ça peut avoir. Eh bien, ça dysfonctionnait dans 93% des cas. Qui sont les premières personnes touchées par ces personnes-là? Sont les publics vulnérables dans les agences d'État. Et bien souvent, le service au rabais qu'on propose, eh bien, il concerne les personnes les plus vulnérables dans notre société. Quand vous avez énormément d'argent à investir, ce n'est pas une IA qui va décider si oui ou non on vous accorde le crédit. Donc, que ce soit dans le système privé ou dans le système public, les premières personnes touchées par cette IA au rabais, en quelque sorte, qui remplace le quantitatif par le qualitatif, ce sont les personnes vulnérables. Troisième point, et je m'arrêterai là, c'est que un des risques majeurs de l'IA qui n'a pas été évoqué encore, c'est à quel point elle touche notre intimité. C'est-à-dire que les IA sont aussi là pour profiler, mais d'une manière qui nous dépasse et qui dépasse notre entendement. La plupart des personnes qui sont dans cette salle ont sans doute qui sont sensibilisées à la question des données, ont très certainement entendu leurs voisins, leurs amis dire « moi, j'ai rien à cacher ». Le problème avec l'intelligence artificielle, c'est qu'on ne sait pas ce que l'on doit cacher, puisqu'on va vous profiler, puisqu'on va construire un profil qui va permettre d'être utilisé pour vous vendre des choses ou pour vous repérer comme une personne à risque, au-delà de tout élément qui serait de notre entendement. Par exemple, la manière, ce que l'on consomme, les personnes que l'on fréquente, les quartiers où on habite. Lorsqu'on parle de reconnaissance émotionnelle, notre température corporelle, la manière dont on cligne des yeux, nos réactions, tous ces éléments-là, qui sont complètement au-delà de notre contrôle, vont pouvoir potentiellement être utilisés contre vous. Et là encore, les perspectives de ce profilage, de cet usage, vont particulièrement toucher dans leurs usages les personnes les plus vulnérables et les plus précaires de notre société. Donc, je crois que là aussi où il y a un point d'attention particulier qu'il faut avoir dans les débats que nous avons aujourd'hui en matière de réglementation, c'est les failles et le renforcement des failles que ça crée dans notre contrat social, dans notre vivre ensemble, lorsque les plus modestes, les plus fragiles, les plus vulnérables de notre société vont être particulièrement touchés.
Merci. Good news?
So I switched to English. It's a nice question because I'm working on one particular field, which is bias and discrimination. And if you are asking someone who dedicated a life towards a certain field and asking like what is important, I think the question is kind of like hard to answer. For me, although I dedicated my career to this particular one, I don't think we should actually choose what is going to be the most important or what is the risk. First of all, I want to also clarify some terminologies here. When we are talking about risk, by definition, this terminology refers to something that's happening in the future. Bias and discrimination, the one that I'm working on, it's not something that's happening actually in the future. This is happening today. And there are many, many examples of that happening, and it's in many sectors. So last year, I actually worked on a project with UN Habitat on AI in cities. So what we did for that, the focus was kind of like application of AI. And then I realized that this is going to be incomplete if we are not talking about risks, right? So instead of like talking about what is the current terminology of the risk, saying short-term risk versus long-term risks, which I have so much of explanation towards like why we are adding timing to it, I actually explained towards the life cycle of AI. And I think we need to think about the landscapes of the risks that are happening. It's not particular risk that is important. And I think if you're putting in the context, in different contexts, it might be a single one that is more important to focus on. The problem that is happening today, and you may or may not see all sorts of debates about like X risk and kind of like all the ones that I consider that are not the necessary risk, there are harm, actually like the people are actually experiencing those harms, is wrong. in my opinion, because we are focusing so much on something that is very subjective. The priority of the risk is subjective. The probability of the risk happening, some of the risks that are happening is particularly for certain actors. So we are actually living in the era for now that we have the agency, right? So I like the point that you're making. So when I switched my career to work on bias and discrimination, it was back in 2016. It was kind of the beginning of like, we are seeing, for example, AI is being used as a decision-making tools, automated decision-making tools in many systems. We are still seeing the growth of it. So Accenture last year, they published an article about like how much of the growth of AI we're seeing in different industries, and it's in every single industry. How much of the AI is influencing job is every single job, right? So the context is huge. The type of harms we are making is huge. The type of risk, and some of the risks, I actually call them hazards because they haven't happened yet, and we can actually kind of focus on the source of it to prevent them. And some of them are actually happening today. And we still, after 10 years of research towards the bias of discrimination, which is something that is actually well known to the field, we still don't have the solution, single bullet solution for how to solve it. And in this particular case, we do have laws against discrimination. I am actually working on fairness, but also on privacy. And in those of those two fields, we do have regulations, right? But there is still a gap. So people are talking about regulations, but we do have laws against discrimination. I am not a lawyer. We do have lawyers here to talk more about it. But we do have laws against discrimination. We have data protection laws, but still there is a gap. We are still kind of dealing with how we can kind of bridging these gaps, right? So when you're raising this question, what is important? I think is all of them are important. And we have to make an effort towards, like, it's been few months that people are actually having these debates about what is important. It's not the important question to ask, actually. What is important is kind of like how we can find a solution. Maybe the solution are aligned. Maybe the way that we can prevent something that's happening in the future is actually something that we can do, and we should kind of like collaboratively working together to find those solutions instead of like debating about like what is important here and why we should kind of focus on one particular one.
I really like your framing there. Thank you so much. Sonia, you're a sociologist. I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Thank you so much for having me. So I spend a lot of time at our research center at McGill, where I co-direct our research on the effects of media and technology on democracy specifically. So this is really where I would drill down to say is the biggest risk for society is to democracy. For me, the risk to democracy is a short-term risk, it's a medium risk, and it's a long-term risk. And when I talk about democracy, I'm really talking about two key things here. It's the ability to affect the public interest and the ability to affect decision-making. And we're seeing a vast power imbalance. I won't rehearse all of the wonderful points my colleagues have raised, but we are seeing such a drastic power imbalance between a handful of companies who are setting the rules that are affecting the contours of public life and decision-making for billions of people around the world. So it's not just the power imbalance for me, it's also the centralization of power. As Joshua so astutely pointed out at the beginning of his talk, it's the centralization of power is not just bad for democracy and human rights, it's bad for business too, right? And lots of governments around the world are trying to get at this in different ways, about the monopoly and the concentration of our market power. So I think we're in this watershed moment right now in AI development, where all of this excitement and innovation has led us to ask questions around, well, what can we deploy towards what social problems can we deploy these systems? And I think now we're kind of reorienting the questions we're asking ourselves. So I really like the question you've posed, actually, because we're asking ourselves which areas of the public sector do we want these systems deployed? Which areas are simply too high risk? Which areas do we not want these systems being involved in our decision making? Do we want these systems deciding who gets a job or who gets social housing or credit? And so I think this is a fundamental solution towards this is governance that puts the public interest in priority in asking these questions around what are uses for these systems And can we agree on some high-risk uses? And can we agree to simply ban uses where we have demonstrably unsafe systems? So I'll leave it there.
Hugo.
Merci Juliette. Merci pour l'invitation. Je suis spécialiste de la cybersécurité, non pas de l'IA. Et on m'a donc invité aujourd'hui pour faire des parallèles entre la cybersécurité et l'IA. C'est-à-dire que depuis de nombreuses années, on se rend compte, et on l'a vécu au Québec d'ailleurs en 2016 avec le piratage chez Desjardins qui a entraîné toute une prise de conscience sociale générale sur des choses dont nous, les spécialistes dans les domaines précis de la recherche, on en parlait depuis 2005, 2006, donc on a une dizaine d'années de retard, à l'époque au moins. Les choses ont grandement changé, de nouvelles législations sont arrivées, la loi 25, pour ne nommer que celle-ci au Québec, qui oblige donc les entreprises privées à rehausser de beaucoup leur niveau de cybersécurité, tout comme les institutions publiques. Je suis aussi un partisan du dialogue interdisciplinaire et intersectionnel, c'est-à-dire qu'à l'École de politique appliquée et à l'Université de Sherbrooke, où je travaille, on a fondé le groupe de recherche interdisciplinaire en cybersécurité qui réunit à peu près toutes les facultés de l'université autour des enjeux de cybersécurité. L'IA a aussi besoin, je pense, de ce dialogue-là, et donc je remercie donc le MILA de nous avoir invités aujourd'hui pour parler de tout ça. Ce qui est intéressant aussi aujourd'hui, c'est que ce dialogue-là que nous avons sur l'IA, on l'a eu un petit peu avec la cybersécurité, mais ça a été un peu trop tard. On a donc vu, et on vit encore de nos jours, les nombreuses conséquences de ce manque de sécurité dans le cyberespace. À l'Université de Sherbrooke, on a un institut, l'Institut quantique, et justement, l'Institut quantique, avec ma collègue Isabelle Lacroix, on a lancé un programme de recherche sur justement comment le quantique va-t-il transformer les sociétés, quels seront les impacts du quantique sur les sociétés. Et là, on est vraiment une bonne vingtaine d'années en avance par rapport à l'IA, mais aussi par rapport à la cybersécurité. Et il y a beaucoup de solutions qui sont proposées devant nous. Si on regarde la littérature, si on regarde les enjeux qui sont anticipés, les problèmes qui sont anticipés. J'aurai peut-être l'occasion d'en reparler un peu plus tard. Toujours est-il que pour répondre à la question qui nous est posée aujourd'hui sur les risques associés à l'IA, je dirais que du point de vue de la cybersécurité, il y a à court terme une augmentation. Et là, quand je parle de court terme, c'est maintenant vers les années subséquentes, c'est-à-dire une augmentation extraordinairement élevée des cyberrisques. Donc, le cyberrisque, qu'est-ce que c'est? C'est la possibilité que vous soyez victime d'une cyberattaque et aussi une augmentation des cybermenaces. Les cybermenaces, ce n'est plus une possibilité, ce n'est plus une probabilité, c'est une réalité. C'est-à-dire qu'on est dans quelque chose où il y a un danger associé à la menace cyber. Et ces dernières années, les menaces ont augmenté en termes de qualité, mais aussi de quantité. Donc, il y en a de plus en plus et elles sont de plus en plus sophistiquées. Si on ajoute dans le calcul du cyberrisque et de la cybermenace la question de l'intelligence artificielle, les acteurs malveillants qui sont à la source de ces cyberrisques et cybermenaces ou les États à travers le monde qui ont ces capacités, puis vont voir leurs capacités justement augmenter d'une façon extraordinaire. Donc, à court terme et à moyen terme, c'est un enjeu très important, un risque très important. De plus, on s'est rendu compte en cybersécurité qu'en ce moment même, il y a toute une industrie de production de virus informatiques. Il y a même des logiciels qui sont vendus de façon industrielle pour créer de nouveaux virus. Donc, voyez-vous, l'écosystème, en ce moment, illicite, bien entendu, est tout à fait favorable au développement de ces cyberrisques et de ces cybermenaces. Or, donc, si on ajoute encore une fois dans le calcul de l'intelligence artificielle, les risques vont être décuplés, démultipliés. Et ça, c'est un peu inquiétant. Sur le moyen terme, je pense que, et je suis d'accord avec mes collègues, les risques politiques, on les vit en ce moment, ils vont être encore plus vastes. On parle de désinformation, protection de la vie privée, toutes sortes d'enjeux associés aux droits d'auteur, etc. Et ça, ce sont des enjeux très importants. Pour les risques à long terme, là, c'est de la futurologie. Et l'IA, les technologies, le quantique, tout ça, ça évolue trop vite. Je ne suis pas en mesure d'avoir une lisibilité très claire sur le long terme.
Vous n'êtes pas seul.
Merci.
Donc, si je vous comprends bien, tout le monde, finalement, il y a un débat. Il y a un débat à savoir si on doit faire le focus. Should we make a focus on, the shorter term, near term priorities, which are disinformation, which are potentially cybersecurity, the destabilization of our democracy, when you think that it only takes 3 seconds of a sample of your voice to be able to recreate your voice and have you say just about anything. right? And the same thing with your image. Before, it took a long time to be able to create these things. Now it's literally 3 seconds. So this stress is accelerating. And on the other hand, we've got the existential threat that it seems to be longer term. But listening to you, I really feel like it's two sides of the same coin. And you may or may not agree with me. And Claire, j'aimerais bien commencer avec toi. Qu'est-ce que tu en penses? Oh, Claire, sorry. Mais Caroline, je sais que tu avais des choses à dire là-dessus aussi.
Yeah, I have two answers to this question.
Yes.
This actually really gets to the core of my thesis. So it's a question I like. I think in part, so answer number one is in part, this is a misunderstanding. When I talk to roboticists, for instance, they will tell me things like, Claire, an AI system that is not embodied inside of a robot, for instance, cannot really be intelligent, because to be intelligent, you need to touch this cup, you need to try to kind of understand, and you need to play around with it to see what uses you can have of it, and maybe you put water in it, maybe you do something more creative. And so they have this idea that an AI system will never truly be intelligent. And so if to them, what is dangerous potentially about a human level AI or superintelligence is the intelligence component, then they're not really scared of an AI system. But as soon as it's embedded in robotics, then they become really scared. Or when I talk to linguists, especially those trained in the 80s, who are more like rule-based linguists, not the natural language processing people, but like the old school linguists, they'll say something like, an AI system has never seen the sun. It's never really experienced it. So even though it can tell you about the sun in a very convincing way, it doesn't truly understand what it means or what it says. And I think those things are completely irrelevant. And in fact, while academics are fighting over these words, understanding intelligence, companies are releasing increasingly powerful systems. There's this saying by Mark Twain, which is, they didn't know it was impossible, so they did it. I think that's what's happening in the private sector right now. And interestingly, when you talk to the same people, oftentimes the roboticists and the linguists, and you drop these words and you just focus on capabilities. What can an AI system do today? What do you think it will be able to do tomorrow? Then there's much more agreement. So that's my first answer. And then my second answer is that I like this question, but I actually don't like this question. Because one, I don't think working on something prevents other people from working on something else. It doesn't really matter to have like issues compete in such a way. First off, I don't think those two things are not related. But if we assume they were not related, would it make sense to say that, we won't reach the 2.5 Celsius increase in climate change for another 10 or 20 years. So why are we not all focusing on poverty? Because there are some people in poverty right now. That doesn't make sense. We can work on both things. Second, I think those two things, what we call short-term risk and what we call long-term risk, are actually highly correlated. Recently, a bunch of researchers released, I can't remember the number, maybe it was like 50,000 biochemical weapons. It was an article in Nature to show that you could use an AI system for that purpose. This is something that is both a harm right now and could be part of the pathway to existential risk. And three, I don't think existential risk are long-term. I think we should really stop using this word. Many experts are saying they're maybe happening in 5 or 10 years. So why are we talking like it's some faraway future? This is very confusing for the public. And then what's the consequence of all this in the law? I'm going to give you one pointer on this. When the AI Act in the EU was released, it was all about mostly recommender algorithms. So they kind of had those systems in mind that were for really specific usage. And the text was really inspired by product safety and data privacy. And the idea was we're going to look at which specific application we deploy an algorithm in, and that will make it low risk or high risk. And then the commission realized, wait a minute, now after ChatGPT came out on the market, they realized, okay, actually, this is not context specific or purpose specific. So now they have these really good provisions for foundation models, which ChatGPT is one. But the problem is it still relies a lot on self-assessment and self-regulation in the sense that companies are supposed to disclose what the potential risks are and how they mitigate them. And if there is a debate on what the risks are, it's going to be problematic. Imagine two companies releasing very similar models, and one says the main risk is discrimination and misinformation, and they address that. And then you have a company that says, okay, the main risk of our system are discrimination and also misinformation and also killing all humans on Earth. Either they won't be able to release it, obviously, but they will invest much more, or they would be supposed to invest much more in mitigating those risks, which will put them at a disadvantage, meaning that the companies who are the most safety conscious are actually going to be disadvantaged, creating a market bad incentive.
Oui, alors moi, je voulais apporter quelques éléments de réponse en tant que juriste, puisque on est dans un panel pluridisciplinaire, donc chacun vient avec ses outils. Je crois qu'on vit véritablement un momentum politique, juridique, puisqu'on a encore le choix de quel modèle de société on souhaite voir mettre en place. Donc, il y aura nécessairement... Donc, on a une très forte responsabilité en tant que civilisation, parce que je pense qu'il y aura un effet cliquet des choix qu'on fera aujourd'hui. Et que forcément, on aura beaucoup de mal à revenir en arrière en disant non, ça finalement, on ne veut pas déployer. Donc en effet, les garanties, les contre-pouvoirs, les garde-fous qu'on posera aujourd'hui dans notre législation vont compter évidemment pour demain. Pour autant, si on s'inscrit dans un temps historique, j'aimerais apporter quelques nuances ou quelques points peut-être qui pourraient nous rassurer. Déjà, l'idée de dire que le droit est en retard est une idée vieille comme la technologie, en réalité. On le retrouve dans des débats d'il y a encore 2 siècles, où on dit la technologie est en retard sur les trains, la technologie est en retard sur le nucléaire, la technologie a toujours été en retard, non, pardon, le droit, excusez-moi, c'est un lapsus révélateur, le droit a toujours été en retard sur la technologie. Pour autant, le juriste n'est pas dépourvu d'outils. On n'avance pas dans un vide normatif. Donc, typiquement, aujourd'hui, on a les droits fondamentaux. La dignité humaine, l'égalité entre les hommes et les femmes, la non-discrimination sont autant de points qui sont d'ores et déjà dans nos ordres juridiques et qui sont censés nous protéger. Donc, ça, le fait de dire ça doit nous rappeler quels sont les enjeux aujourd'hui et comment on doit poser les questions. À mon sens, ce momentum qu'on vit est celui de l'opérationnalisation des droits fondamentaux en matière d'IA. C'est-à-dire que je crois qu'on est d'accord sur les valeurs qui nous unissent et qui font qu'on est des démocraties libérales. Maintenant, comment on fait en sorte que ces valeurs puissent être respectées, suivies dans le droit qui va encadrer les technologies, les IA d'aujourd'hui et de demain. À cet égard, moi, il me semble que on a 3 pistes importantes sur lesquelles il faut qu'on travaille ensemble. Les procédures, quelles sont les procédures qu'on met en place, les modes d'emploi pour les administrations, pour les entreprises, qu'elles doivent suivre avant les déploiements sur le marché, pendant les déploiements sur le marché et après. Ça, c'est un premier point. Au terme de ces procédures, plus largement, je crois qu'il faut penser, on a parlé de liability, responsabilité, mais je crois qu'il faut aussi parler de accountability, redevabilité. Il est très important de développer des régimes où précisément, on va préciser quelles sont les exigences que l'on attend des acteurs qui déploient et qui utilisent les IA. Et troisièmement, je crois qu'il est très important, d'un point de vue juridique, mais aussi d'un point de vue politique, de prendre en considération qu'on a besoin à la fois des scientifiques, de la communauté scientifique, mais on a besoin aussi, dans ces choix importants, du public. Et ce qu'il est fondamental, c'est de construire un espace public technologique dans lequel on va pouvoir discuter, débattre de la technologie que l'on veut et de faire en sorte d'entendre la voix de tous sur qu'est-ce que c'est que l'IA responsable. Donc, je crois que c'est sur ces 3 chantiers qu'il faut qu'on se concentre et que l'on a pas mal d'exemples aussi historiques qui nous permettent de réfléchir à ça. Tous les travaux des années 90 sur le nucléaire, alors j'ai bien entendu la différence qui a été mentionnée, elle est juste, mais on a déployé plein de modes d'emploi, plein de réflexions qui peuvent encore aujourd'hui nous accompagner. On a aussi des exemples historiques dans les démocraties, dans notre rapport à la technique. Comme on le disait à midi, jusque dans les années 70, au sein du Congrès américain, on avait une commission qui décidait des questions de quelles sont les innovations acceptables, qu'est-ce qu'on exige des acteurs de la technologie avant de déployer, pour déployer. Donc je crois qu'on n'est pas dépourvu, à la fois dans le droit et dans l'histoire, pour apporter des réponses très concrètes aux enjeux qui nous sont posés.
Well, we also saw in the 1990s the huge deregulation of technology in the United States, specifically pertinent to many of the companies that control artificial intelligence, at least in Silicon Valley. And so, you know, yes, we do have things that we can look back to, but I think that we also have to look forward and try to create new measures as well. For instance, I think about regulation, and we will be asked, on va certainement ouvrir à tous l'opportunité de poser des questions, mais on va quand même poursuivre avec le panel, avec nos panélistes entre-temps. Donc, quand on pense à la régulation, when we talk about regulation, there are some countries that are very focused on trying to balance innovation with the possibility of doing it responsibly, right? And so you want to be able to compete, you want to be able to maintain your competitive advantage as you're also developing regulations that will protect people so that they are not harmed. The question is, and I think the big fear is, that not everybody will play by the same rules. C'est pas tout le monde qui va suivre les mêmes règles. Même si nous, ici au Canada ou aux États-Unis, en Europe, c'est pas partout à travers le monde que ça va suivre les mêmes règlements. Et donc, qu'est-ce qu'on fait avec ça? Parce qu'il y a énormément de peur. Et I have to ask this simple question. Are we developing artificial intelligence for the arms race, or are we developing it for the human race? And do we have to make that distinction?
Human race or arms race?
That was almost the title of my book, actually, but thank you. But is this really something that we have to decide? Like, I feel like we're torn in many ways, especially because of the military industrial complex.
Right now, there's a money race. The amount of money that is being invested in AI right now in 2023 is huge, and it's just the beginning. The projections for 2030 or something like this give around $20 trillion per year of revenue from the followers of current like large language models.
Right.
And other calculations talk about a net present value of AI in the quadrillions of dollars. Okay, this is like huge. It's going to completely transform our economies, according to these calculations by various people and economists. And you know, they seem reasonable to me. But in any case, even if you change by a factor, that's enough to incentivize incredible amounts of resources in the commercial race. So there's a commercial race, and Caroline, you said that maybe we will not develop the wheel. But there's so much money put into developing the wheel that it would be very surprising if it doesn't happen. And we need a counterbalance. We need governments to step in and say, okay, this is something touchy. This is something that can change society for good or badly.
Yeah.
Governments need to have a big say in what could be done, should be done, and even be part of it. Like right now, the only organizations that can build these systems are a few commercial companies. I think labs that are nonprofit and that are working in collaboration with governments, but not too closely, because there's the arms race problem, should be involved, should be able to develop the same level of technology and making sure that we work on protecting the public at least as much as we work on improving capability.
So when I think about power and artificial intelligence, I think of the government logic, right? There's also the corporate logic, which are often either working together at odds in other permutations. I also think of engineering logic, right? Very, very straightforward. I need to get my job done, and there's beauty in the simplicity of just being able to focus on your work. But then there's a social justice logic, and I feel like that fourth logic is also coming to the fore more and more, and it's incredibly important to do so. So I just wonder, to what extent, you talked about accountability, isn't it also part of this larger debate to bring these four logics to bear so that we can have conversations together, that one of these logics should not have supremacy over the others, so that we can create frameworks where essentially our AI works for all of us in all of our contexts? And so I go to something else that was brought up earlier, is the fifth logic, the logic that is the scientist, the logic that is the academic. And what role do these five logics have in bringing forth the kind of artificial intelligence that we would all like to see? So from the corporate logic, the business logic, the government logic, the engineering logic, the scientific logic, what are the different roles that each one plays in terms of developing this technology, and how can we bring them all together as stakeholders, accountable stakeholders?
Différents rôles, bien entendu. Le rôle des entreprises privées, c'est justement l'innovation, faire des profits, etc. Donc, c'est tout à fait naturel que l'on assiste en ce moment au développement de l'IA, mais aussi des sommes extraordinairement prévues de revenus. Ça, c'est tout à fait logique. Le rôle des gouvernements est plus ambigu. Hein. Ça, c'est un aspect que j'aimerais aborder, c'est-à-dire que le rôle des gouvernements est là pour justement protéger le public, limiter les excès, justement, des entreprises privées, mais en même temps, les gouvernements sont pris dans une compétition internationale. Donc, on parlait de course à l'armement. Évidemment, la course à l'armement, tout ça, si on fait des parallèles justement avec la non-prolifération nucléaire, elle est très, très, très difficile pour l'intelligence artificielle, à l'instar du cyber, parce que la matière première, c'est l'information. Et l'information, elle est immatérielle. Or, le cyber, tout comme l'IA, je m'en rends compte en ce moment en vous parlant, hein, c'est une des seules géopolitiques où les gouvernements sont pris dans la logique suivante, c'est-à-dire que la surface d'attaque augmente de façon proportionnelle à l'innovation ou au développement de l'arsenal. C'est donc dire, en langage plus clair, excusez-moi si je n'ai pas été clair, c'est-à-dire que les vulnérabilités augmentent au fur et à mesure que l'on développe le logiciel ou l'intelligence artificielle. Et donc, les gouvernements sont dans une logique où ils doivent justement avoir cette concurrence-là, lutter contre cette concurrence-là, mais aussi protéger la population. Pour protéger la population, ils ont bâti donc des principes et des politiques de sécurité nationale où il y a des acteurs comme les services de renseignement, les services de sécurité, les forces armées, qui ont développé leur propre IA et qui l'utilisent justement pour lutter contre la criminalité et lutter contre les menaces à la sécurité nationale. Donc, les gouvernements sont dans un drôle de rôle, limiter, développer, être en concurrence, etc., etc. Pour les autres secteurs, je vais laisser mes collègues qui sont beaucoup plus compétents que moi à répondre à ces rôles-là.
Merci, Hugo.
I just want to mention that if you're talking about AI research, most of the AI research are based on some sort of evaluation on some sort of ground truth, right? And the objective that you're designing for the task and all the success that we are often talking about is based on efficiency. But we should question, like, what is efficiency here? And would efficiency actually benefits everyone? And in terms of like my work, I think I can say that like efficiency is not the question that we should ask. And the reason that we have this kind of bias and discrimination is kind of because of this kind of utilitarian approach towards solving problems. And the tasks that we are focusing on are often the benchmark are coming from industry, right? So they are investing money and they are putting lots of money towards like which task even the researchers that are outside of the industry, which is still like we are actually in the era that many of these researchers are in the industry, actually working for the industry, but even outside of the industry, they are working towards the goal of the industry in a sense. They are working towards the goal of those benchmarks, those tasks. So one of the issues for me is the metrics that we are using. The metric that we are using in order to measure the harm event, right? So most of the discussions are around powerful AI systems, but the harms are not necessarily coming from the most powerful AI system. We can actually create harm with a very dumb AI system. And can we measure like how much it has a cost? And some of the things that they are considered as a short term, like the bias, it has a long consequences. So assuming that we are having this AI tool that is going to be used, and there are examples of it that are used for a screening task. So then historically, they are discriminating towards women or minority groups.
Or both.
Or both. What is happening is that, okay, so it's happening at the screening, but then it's actually influencing the job opportunities, who is actually getting hired, who is going to work at those workplaces, the diversity of the workplaces, and then the products are coming. It's not from a diverse opinion. It's very much far-reaching. How you can measure the harm that is actually produced by a system that is just used for a screening or certain fields. And it is happening today, right? We cannot even measure like the long-term effect of it. We are talking about like AI have a control over humans. If you are the users of social media, most of them are based on money of the advertisements. And so much they are doing the research towards the psychology of like how you are going to get addicted to see more advertisements. We are already actually getting powered by AI to act in a certain way. If you are asking like psychologists around this kind of like focus span of the people, it has been reduced by the AI system that is deployed today. We are using them today. The psychological effect of it on teenagers, for example, on mental health, people are healed, etc. These are the costs that we are already paying, right? So we should think about the measurements, how we are measuring this harm, how we are measuring like what we think about existential harm. Is it in terms of the cost on number of people? Is it the cost of the lives? How we can actually compare it with other risks, right? So we should think about the measures. And in terms of discrimination in different fields, I still don't have any particular metric because it's very subjective. And we don't have that much of money poured into different fields to discuss and kind of coming up with the metrics. Regulation is not the key. The reasoning is that still it's very vague, like how we can actually measure this. And for me, we need to create a capacity, for measurements, create a capacity like how we should deal with the system. And it actually requires this multidisciplinary efforts. It should not be just computer scientists, because for a while, even bias and discrimination are solved by computer scientists. We should not even solve it. AI is a socio-technical challenge. So we should include that. And I'm happy about this particular panel that we have political scientists, we have social scientists, we have lawyers and computer scientists, and we need also the people who are getting harmed to tell us what they need, why we are just listening to the industry to tell us like what they need. So we should include people in the loop, right? And that's the question, like what is human in the loop? But the consumers should be in the loop.
Not just the consumers. Let me just add that. I don't think it's just the consumers. I don't think it's just the voters. I do think that it is we, the people, all of us together, regardless of what our role is in society. But you might disagree.
Yeah. Actually,
You go.
On this invitation to disagree, maybe I'll point a little counterpoint here. I agree that harm-based regulation has largely failed us for all sorts of reasons, but I do think that regulation is one of the key levers that we can pull in this debate. And I wouldn't categorize it as harm-based. I think we're seeing I'm very encouraged by models that are risk-based. So the EU is doing a risk-based model to AI regulation that I think Canada can emulate, along with like an independent regulator that is really going to be able to enforce some of these mechanisms. But I think thinking of the risks before a potential harm happens is really going to be key for policymakers. Yes. And that's not to say that we shouldn't stop researching the harms, because lawyers and policymakers need evidence-based models for how to design these risk-based approaches to governance. So for me, I do think regulation is a key here. And I would just point to risk-based models as one additional element.
Can I just answer to that? My point is not that regulation should not be taking place. I think it's going to be hard. Regulation taking place long term, and wrong regulation might produce more harms. I also don't like to go towards kind of like the measurements towards just focusing on harms. No, we should not be reactive. We should be active towards the risk that we are foreseeing, right? We should see the source, right? And kind of like kill it at the source. And we can do it for many of the risks that people are talking today about the actors, about the certification, about the auditing, but we don't have that capacity. And I think AI is dynamic in nature, and we should kind of rethink about the regulation system that are also dynamic in nature. So auditing for me is bridging this gap between like what we can define as metrics that can be standards, that can be certificates, that can be guidelines, and then become the regulation.
Just wanted to add a couple of points related to all of these. We need agility in the regulatory bodies that are going to be put in place in different countries, because we don't yet understand all the risks. We don't know what the right benchmarks will be. Technology is going to move. The nefarious users, we don't think of all of them right now. And that was one of my important recommendations at the US Senate. We need to invest massively in better understanding what needs to be done to protect the public. So that's both technical research and like AI research and governance research and the socio-technical combination of both that will guide future regulations, because it's going to be a moving target. It's something that needs years of research and debates and discussions. So there needs to be a much greater investment to gradually improve the regulation, and it needs to be done in a way that we don't need to go back to the legislator, every 6 months, because that's not going to work.
And I'd just like to underline the wording here, socio-technical systems, which de facto means that we shape our technology, and our technology, in fact, shapes us as well, right? It's a two-edged sword. And so we're working together, we're doing the dance together. I love this conversation so far. This is absolutely fascinating. J'aimerais ça vous inclure plus, parce que vous avez bien commencé, c'était en grande force, mais là, vous écoutiez, là. Qu'est-ce qui vous trotte en tête là, pendant que vous écoutez tout ça?
Ouais, I think that the last two questions raise a very, very difficult issue, almost maybe a tragic dilemma for public administrations and government. So one thing that those of us who paid attention to say what was going on in business ethics, just before, the progress in AI, one of the conclusions, and I look at my colleagues, Rioa and Danielle here, was that, okay, in business ethics, we shouldn't rely too much on self-regulation, right? You shouldn't expect that, good ethical behaviors will flow naturally from, the personal virtues and dispositions and goodwill of executives, managers, and even developers, engineers, and so on. And all the better if they are intrinsically, virtuous, but we should not rely too heavily on that. Even, sometimes engineers or, professionals, they also belong to a profession, and that can counterbalance the expectations of, say, management. That could be a good case, but in many cases, computer scientists are not under such a professional authority, and that's an important problem. So if self-regulation is not the answer, then we need hard external regulations. And so I want to concur with my colleagues here. And I think that that's an emerging consensus, right? Despite our disagreement on more maybe speculative questions, that's an emerging consensus. But the tragic dilemma here is related to the previous questions about the arms race, right? So we also don't want to live in a world where, say, only illiberal and non-democratic countries have access to the best, most advanced technology, right? That would be a dangerous world. So it's a very delicate balance. We need to regulate. We should not, just say, well, there will be free riders who will not regulate the field, so we cannot regulate. No, we shouldn't accept that argument. We need to regulate because of all the harms and risks that we mentioned, but we also need to understand, state-of-the-art technology and keep following where it's going. So it's a very difficult balancing act, but it's been done in other domains.
Yeah, I feel like though this is something different. I feel like, and perhaps you're thinking of CRISPR, for example, technology where Ms. Dudna went and not only invented or co-invented the technology, she also went and did a TED Talk where she implored the entire world, including her colleagues, to please take a 6-month moratorium so that we could talk about what we wanted to do with CRISPR technology and gene editing. I feel like you told the world that we should do something similar with advanced artificial intelligence. I can tell you that I did an AI salon in New York on August 1st, and I asked a bunch of practitioners of AI, specifically who are using generative technology, and they almost laughed in my face. They did not take it as seriously. And I said, well, if we can't listen to our fathers and our grandfathers, then who can we listen to? At the same time, we've got a shortage, for example, of teachers in the United States. And I'm hearing a big push to use generative AI, ChatGPT, to teach students without any kind of human supervision. We know that they hallucinate. We're talking about the next generations. This is direct. So I'd be curious, as educators, as academics, as people that do believe that self-regulation is not working, what should we do? Should we, if we have shortages, for example, in key areas, especially after the pandemic, should we be allowing chatbots to teach our children? And if not, what do we do as humans? Like, these are, I think, as important in the short term as the idea of regulation is in the medium to longer term.
I wanted to say something about what Jocelyn raised regarding the tragic dilemma. And I guess he was thinking about, say, Russia or China developing powerful AI while we go slowly because of regulation.
Yep.
So I think this is a really important point. And there is strangely something interesting here, which is the most kind of concerning risks, the existential risks, or like loss of control, might be the thing that brings around the table those countries to the same table. Just like the fear of nuclear Armageddon brought, China and the USSR and US around the same table in the 50s and 60s, because we all lose if we don't address these bigger risks. It's not about one country against another, it's humanity against, something that can endanger humanity. So whether you think those risks are important or not, they might be an interesting strategic aspect to make sure the whole planet starts doing the right thing.
It's the Independence Day argument where all humanity comes together to fight the aliens. Now we're fighting AI. It kind of, It should be interesting to see if indeed this fear, this overarching fear, can bring us together as humans. If we can forget about our nationalities and our differences and potentially collaborate together, that might be very powerful. And let's bring in the philosopher. Yes.
Well, very quickly. One of the most frustrating exercises that I've put myself into was to participate in a UNESCO expert meeting that led to the recommendation on responsible AI, right? It was frustrating because I realized that, it wasn't about AI ethics, it was about international relations and spokesperson talking about, well, our state interest is such and such. And so I quickly lost interest. But at the end, though, all the countries, rallied and did, endorse the recommendation. So it's a non-binding document, but Iran, Russia, China were all at the table and they all signed up for it and they all agreed. They tried to, water down some, clauses and so on, but we have that document now. The UNESCO, and it's the only one which included all the countries. So we can build on that step that was taken already.
Okay, so using that potentially as a framework, parlons d'une gouvernance internationale. À quoi ça ressemblerait? À quoi ça ressemblerait là, if there was an international body and Yashio, when you spoke to Congress in the United States, you mentioned this as a possibility. I've heard others, Gary Marcus, for example, also talks about this and deeply believes in it. So what would that look like and how would that work for all of us and not just some of us?
So first, I want to add a few things why it's needed. It's needed because even if few liberal democracies agree to do something about regulating the risks of AI and the current harms, for example, the dangerous misuse and so on, doesn't have any border, right? So you could have an AI system running in a country that doesn't have those regulations, that gets used to bring harm in our countries. And so it's not something that we can solve, separately. We need the international community to be part of that. I think we can learn from the failures and the successes of the climate change negotiations internationally. One mistake would be to try to negotiate independently of other international agreements, something about AI. If we want this to work, we need to bind these kinds of agreements with other agreements, in particular commerce, right? Because that's the thing that's going to bring all the countries, they want to be part of the international commerce, including China. They need the rest of the world to buy their stuff. So yeah, we need that frame of mind. It's unlikely that we're going to have a binding agreement anytime soon, but the UN and other international organizations can play a role as conveners, just like Jocelyn was mentioning, to rally more people around those discussions. And also, there's probably going to be differences, cultural differences, right? I don't think to draw details here, but there are things on which we will not agree, but we can still agree on some of the bigger risks, for example, and we should do that. Then it's going to be impossible for a UN level kind of organization to enforce whatever agreement we come to. More likely, I mean, it's going to be difficult. More likely, we should rely on national regulation to do the enforcing. At least that's a more reasonable path in the coming years.
But who gets to be the chief? Who gets to be the chef?
We don't want a chief. We don't want a chief. This is really important. Right?
Thank you. That's why I'm asking you to bring it up.
We need decentralized power, whether it's in terms of companies, countries, people. Hold on.
Oh, we've got hands going up. Okay, we're going to go to the audience in about 2 minutes. So let's get a very quick wrap up for those of you who had your hands up. C'est à votre tour.
Alors, cette fois-ci, je serai en désaccord, mais pour jouer la version pessimiste de la chose, parce que j'étais l'optimiste tout à l'heure. En tant que juriste, moi, je ne crois pas du tout aux solutions internationales. Je les espère, je les souhaite. Évidemment, je ne peux que vous rejoindre sur ce constat-là. Mais je crois malheureusement que ce n'est pas l'échelon où on parviendra, par rapport aux enjeux que vous avez posés, dans le temps qui nous est donné, à avoir les véritables réponses que l'on espère par rapport à ces questions-là.
Ça pourrait accélérer le processus.
Oui. Alors, ça ne veut pas dire qu'il ne faut pas regarder ça, encourager, souhaiter. Là, je vous suis parfaitement. Mais je crois que malheureusement, ce n'est pas la dynamique dans laquelle on peut fonder tous nos espoirs. Et je le dis aussi en tant que pragmatique, parce qu'il faut trouver aussi les points où on peut appuyer, agir pour faire avancer les choses. Et à mon sens, il y a deux endroits, il y a deux points de contrôle sur lesquels on peut appuyer. Premièrement, moi, je crois très fortement à la régionalisation de la régulation. Oui, alors très court. Régionalisation de la régulation, c'est-à-dire là, ce qu'on fait au sein de l'Union européenne est susceptible d'influencer et de faire bouger la tectonique des plaques de la gouvernance mondiale en matière d'IA. Et deuxièmement, ce qui est déjà là en tant que gouvernance internationale, ce sont les standards techniques. Et là, on voit qu'on a des normes globales. L'ISO est en train de poser des normes globales. Donc, je crois qu'il faut regarder ça de très près parce qu'on a besoin notamment de juristes en droit de l'homme qui vont aller regarder ces standards et voir comment, techniquement, on déploie tout ça. Et c'est un levier d'action très important pour pouvoir construire les choses, même si on n'est pas dans les grandes lignes qu'on espère et qu'on doit nécessairement poser.
Parfait. Dernier commentaire? Oui, vite, très, très vite.
Rapidement, OK. Donc, d'une part, je pense qu'il faut quand même contester un peu ce narratif de AI arms race entre les pays. La Chine est quand même derrière les États-Unis. China is behind the US in terms of AI development.
Oh, I think that's depending on who you ask, actually.
Well, it seems that they're unfortunately quite good at things like facial recognition and surveillance technologies, but in terms of other technologies like general purpose AI system, it seems that they are behind. And I think having this narrative of the AI arms race actually gets the US to compete against itself and speeds up the development. Second, there's talk of having some sort of IAEA for AI, just like there is for nuclear. I do believe that we're getting close to a point where certain AI systems will be the equivalent of people being able to make a nuclear bomb in their kitchen. So I think that it is actually a good idea to have such an agency. And for those who are skeptical of things like the UN, I understand it's frustrating. It takes a long time. It's impossible to get things in writing and treaties. But I don't think the treaties are actually the most valuable that these organizations bring. I think what's the most important is not what happens in the meeting rooms at the UN, but what happens in the hallways. And so such organizations can actually provide a forum for countries like China and the US to talk, especially if they get close to AGI. And yeah, last point, I think having such an agency would also be a good place to have to receive whistleblower complaints, whether they're on things like misinformation or risk of AGI or other things. So I think it's actually a great idea to have something like that.
That's a really interesting perspective. So we promised the audience that you get a chance to ask some questions. I'm not going to be the one to point at you because we've got somebody who's far more qualified. Thank you very much for participating in the panel.
Merci beaucoup, Juliette. Donc, on demanderait aux participants dans la salle qui ont des questions d'aller au micro qui est au milieu, là. Je vois un monsieur qui avait déjà une question. Si c'est possible pour vous d'aller au micro. Et idéalement, il y aurait une personne qui s'identifie comme femme et une personne qui s'identifie comme homme, un à la suite de l'autre, en alternance. Question de créer de la parité dans les questions. Ça me semble correct pour les quelques premières personnes. Nous avons un certain temps, là, on a un bon 20 minutes de questions devant nous. Si ça prend moins de temps, ça prend moins de temps avec des remarques à la fin. Donc, vous pouvez être au moins 4 ou 5. Là. Idéalement également, so when you have a question, please direct it to someone. And if someone else wants to bounce back on it, they will, but you cannot ask the question to the full panel. It won't end. So go ahead.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Really enjoyed this event. I guess I'll direct this question to Jocelyn, because I think I heard you express the argument that, AGI is maybe kind of far off and we shouldn't be too worried about it right now. And Joshua had one response, which I think I agree with, which is that we actually don't know that it's that far off. But I think another response that I think is maybe even stronger is it's going to take a lot of time to prepare for this. So I'd like to make the analogy with climate change, where we've had decades of scientific consensus, and we still aren't taking effective, coordinated global action. So if we agree that AGI is something that's going to require international agreement of a similar level as we need to address the climate crisis, I think we need decades of time. So even if we think it's decades off, it seems urgent to start working on that right now, especially because right now we still don't have the scientific consensus that the climate community had, again, for, I want to say 30, 40 years. So just would like to get your response to that. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much for the question. Yeah, okay. So my point wasn't about certainty, right? I was at the same level as you are at plausibility. How plausible it is. It's not impossible. It's certainly conceivable. But you probably all know that these grand claims about the future development of AI are as old as AI itself, right? First generation of AI pioneers, they all thought that within decades, right, we would reach AGI and go beyond. It didn't happen. Now, I'm truly impressed by progress made in AI in the past 2 decades. But we're talking about, deep learning models which learns in a particular way and which are very, very far from the kind of multi-dimensional intelligence that animals such as us have. And you said that yourself very often in many of your talks. We don't have something like AI who have common sense. We don't have anything that resemble practical reasoning in AI systems.
Yeah, actually, we do.
No, well, practical reasoning is about the capacity to connect. No, but do you want me to finish the answer? Or no? Practical reasoning is about, among other things, connecting, higher level abstract principle to concrete situations and unique situations, outliers, rare data, and so on. And we have that, and it's normal because it's very useful, to survive. It's an evolved capacity. It's not something that was designed. So when I'll see that we're moving toward, truly general intelligence, multidimensional, I will worry more than I'm worrying now, but I'm not seeing it, and I don't see how we start from deep learning algorithms to that endpoint. But I'm more willing to change my mind if I see the evidence.
You should play a bit more with ChatGPT.
Oh, I did.
Bonjour, moi ça va être une question pour Caroline. J'ai vraiment beaucoup aimé vos interventions. En particulier, je pense que les standards ISO vont être indispensables pour les compagnies, pour les aider à faire des logiciels d'IA qui fonctionnent. La question que j'aurais pour vous, je pense que ça a été cité par personne. Que pensez-vous de l'idée d'avoir une base de données des incidents en IA à déclaration obligatoire pour toutes les organisations qui utilisent de l'IA, qu'elles soient publiques, privées, etc. On a la AI Incident Database qui existe, mais présentement, tout ce qu'elle prend, c'est des articles de journaux. Et je suis persuadée qu'il y a beaucoup de choses qui se passent behind the scenes, qui ne sont pas déclarées, rapportées, puis qui nous empêchent peut-être un petit peu de comprendre quelles sont les problématiques qui sont rencontrées au jour d'aujourd'hui avec l'ensemble des systèmes qui sont déployés par les différentes organisations.
Oui, je vous remercie pour la question. Évidemment que ce serait une initiative qui me semblerait aller dans le bon sens. La question de fond qu'il y a derrière la vôtre, c'est la question de la transparence. Et en effet, aujourd'hui, c'est une vraie difficulté que l'on rencontre et un vrai problème pour la mise en place des régimes de redevabilité. On le voit, et d'ailleurs, actuellement en Europe, on a un gros contentieux à ce sujet-là, où on essaye de comprendre quelles ont été les difficultés sur des systèmes qui ont été déployés, notamment par des administrations, et on ne parvient pas à résoudre le problème parce qu'en face, on est des acteurs privés qui opposent le secret industriel et qui empêchent précisément la mise en place de recours et de rendre des comptes. Donc, je crois que toutes les mesures qui pourront être prises en matière de transparence seront positives. Maintenant, la question qui va se poser, c'est précisément comment on va trouver le compromis avec l'industrie. On avait cette discussion à midi en disant est-ce qu'il faut que tout soit open source ou est-ce qu'on est tout secret? Et en effet, on comprend bien que la réponse, elle se situe dans un juste milieu. Ce qui était suggéré à midi, c'était de dire il faut qu'on ait des autorités compétentes qui soient habilitées pour aller contrôler. Moi, ma réponse, elle irait aussi dans ce sens-là. C'est-à-dire qu'on a besoin de personnes qui vont être nommées, qui vont être capables d'aller voir ces bases de données, d'aller voir les problèmes, d'aller auditer le code pour comprendre et avancer. Parce qu'en effet, c'est un énorme problème dans les régimes de responsabilité et de redevabilité.
Hi, thanks everybody on the panel. I'm not exactly sure who my question is best directed at, maybe Claire, maybe Joshua, or other people involved in regulation. I want to make a quick point first as an alignment researcher, somebody who has worked on alignment, that I think technical alignment is not really the main issue. I think if anything, a lot of these systems are too well aligned. ChatGPT is doing a great job of making OpenAI and Microsoft a whole lot of money and giving them power and influence, including in influence of technical researchers going there to work. And that's doing a great job for the US of increasing their power and sort of hegemony in AI and their arms race against China and whoever else. So my question has two parts. One is, how do we actually realign these incentives? Or what are the teeth going to be on this regulation? Because what I see as most likely, and maybe I'm just a pessimist, is that we get regulation, we get licenses, but OpenAI is the first one to get the licenses because they had a huge role in designing what the licenses look like. And they keep doing the same kinds of things that they're already doing, even if the international community of governance agrees that we shouldn't do those things.
Well, that means we have the wrong regulation, right? So one of the important aspects that was in the US government's commitment request is external independent experts, just as Caroline was talking about, able to have visibility on what they're doing. And so, yeah, for that, we obviously can't rely on self-regulation.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I agree with you. I agree with what you just said. I think there are also a few things. So first off, you know, reinforcement learning from human feedback used right now by OpenAI and companies is not done in a very democratic way. So I think including people in that, determining at society's level what values we want to align AI systems with, I think it's also the regulation part of alignment, right? I think also companies should have a requirement to disclose the hard patches they make to the systems, maybe not publicly for certain ones, because you don't want a info hazard where people know like what they could try to do with the systems, but oftentimes companies like OpenAI, there's someone, you know, that will jailbreak the system and it will prove that you can do something bad with it. And then the company, instead of really fixing the problem at the core, because we don't really know what's happening with these systems, they'll do a hard-coded patch, which is, okay, now if you ask a specific question, it won't work. I think that's also a problem. There was another proposition in the hearing that you were part of, which was a bit more radical, which was as soon as an AI system harms someone, creates harms, it should be taken off the market until it's fixed. I really like that proposition. I think it's a great one.
Simplement pour vous indiquer qu'il n'y a plus de traduction à partir de 4h30 puisqu'on est.
So do I speak English or French?
English would be best.
Okay.
Please. Yeah.
So I don't know who to direct it at, whoever feels the most impelled by it, if anybody. So I'm sensing a little bit of a lack of fit between the things that we've been talking about for the last 20 minutes or so in terms of regulatory frameworks and the really, really scary things that Joshua was talking about at the beginning of his presentation. I'll be quick. It seems to me that the really, really scary things, not that the other things aren't scary, but they're just really scary as opposed to really, really scary, have to do with two things. A, unintended consequences, and B, rogue agents. Regulation involves being able to enforce or at least to incentivize. Rogue agents don't care, and unintended consequences are unintended. So we can't latch on to the intentions of people in order to regulate them. Okay, well, Joshua has obviously jumped on the mic, which is great. But so I'd like to hear about, you know, how we triangulate questions of regulation and questions of the really, really scary scenarios of rogue agents and unintended consequences.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this in the last few months. I think regulation is plan A, and it would reduce the risks by a huge factor. But there will still be accidents, unintentional, and there will still be bad actors doing things that are, of course, not following the protocols. And I think we need a plan B for this. So this is maybe a place where I differ with David, who asked the question earlier. I think we need to develop socio-technical solutions to prepare against those possibilities. That means countermeasures. So it's kind of like national security, except it's not aimed at other countries. It's aimed at AI systems, which could be autonomous or not, but that are deployed in ways that our current usual infrastructure can't deal with. And I'm not saying it's going to save us, but what else can we do? I don't know, but and that potentially means, that's where I differ with David, I think, that potentially means developing AI that's going to be safe and that can help us fight superhuman AIs that may arise in the future. And that's tricky because we don't want to bring the thing we want to avoid, but we need to think about those possibilities.
Do someone else wants to jump in on that? No? Okay. Please in English.
French. I'm perfect in French.
Okay. I'll translate. I will translate.
Yeah, okay, sorry. My point, I'm Jean-Pierre Lejean from RED, Réseau Expertise en Éthique de Données. On développe des solutions pour l'accompagnement des entreprises pour la loi 25 et on fait partie du comité d'éthique de l'Université Laval. Si.
Près du micro, s'il vous plaît.
OK, parfait. Donc, mon point, ça s'adresse surtout à Caroline. Merci beaucoup pour cette belle phrase lorsque vous parlez de la prison de l'algorithme de la pauvreté. Et sauf que moi, de ma réflexion, puisque c'était porté sur les risques, et de ce côté-là, je ne vois pas comment l'IA aggrave cette situation. Parce que dans le profilage, par exemple, ça ne fait que, puisque c'est basé sur un apprentissage, basé sur des données antérieures, et puis pour faire ce qu'on appelle la régression, pour faire des projections. Donc, ça ne fait que, à mon avis, accélérer une perception, une procédure de profil. Par exemple, question crédit, question client, prix des maisons, tout ça. Donc, ceci dit, s'il faut mettre ça en question en termes d'exclusion, donc il faut commencer par remettre en question ce système de production-là qui crée, et, à mon avis, qui accentue l'exclusion. Je ne sais pas si vous savez mon point. De ce côté-là, le risque de l'IA dans le profilage, donc c'est basé sur des données qui ont été enregistrées. Même quand quelqu'un se présente dans les banques, donc quelqu'un, les 400 personnes qui sont renvoyées là, dans cette entreprise-là aux États-Unis, qu'il y ait des personnes physiques ou l'IA, ça aurait donné le même résultat en termes de profilage, selon moi. Et deuxième point, la question de gouvernance. Je pense que c'est un très bon point qui est introduit ici, parce que je ne vois pas comment on peut gérer tous ces risques-là qu'on a identifiés, parce qu'aujourd'hui, ce n'est pas une question d'espace comme local, en local de gérer ça. Avec les objets connectés, tout le monde compile des données, les Chinois, les Russes, les Américains, les Canadiens, on ne sait pas qu'est-ce qu'ils vont faire avec ces données-là. Et même quand les politiques collectent les données, ils peuvent les utiliser pour les retourner contre les citoyens, contre un individu dans des campagnes négatives, dans les élections. Moi, je pense que c'est un gros débat qui est introduit ici. Moi, j'espère qu'il puisse avoir des chaires de recherche pour voir comment la société civile, en tant que citoyen, comment on va avoir la souveraineté et sur ces données-là. Justement, moi, je fais partie d'une entreprise et lorsqu'on était bloqué, en fait, c'était travailler dans le sens que pour que les citoyens aient tout le temps la souveraineté sur les données. Moi, pour ce que je vois
Pardon,
dans
monsieur.
le monde...
Donc, on va adresser votre première question vers Caroline sur les billets. Maybe, did you get the question, Gulnush? So, okay, so it was about how you can represent some biases and, well, maybe you could talk about just shortly how the biases representation works in AI and what we could do to just
I mean, one thing I understood is the part of the question was, is it not just going to expand the kind of discrimination that already exists, but is it going to, why would it make it worse? Right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I can explain a bit how the discrimination actually happening. So if you're thinking of like particular example of hiring, for instance, right? Discrimination, if you're just focusing on discrimination toward, for example, certain groups, then here in this example, I'm going to be gender and then like the system being sexist or not. There are so many routes of like that can happen. And one can be particular in the data that the model is trained on. So the data can be, for example, most of the data points are from men, right? And the most of the decision, the positive decision of like, for example, receiving the job or not receiving a job, it's also men, right? So part of the issue is that we are having historical, for example, discrimination. So, and the data that we have is unbalanced, right? So part of it is just the data, but it's also part of it is the design of the system. So the way that we are designing the system, the metric, and as I mentioned, the metric that we are choosing is actually working toward utilitarian approach. And what does that mean is that working towards some sort of majority pattern in the data. And the majority pattern could be, for example, the male population in the data. And because of this design, even the bias that we have a system, if we can measure it, for example, is 80%, the model can amplify that because it's actually focusing more towards that majority group because it wants to kind of like use all the resources and all the parameters that it has in order to learn better for that particular, because it has higher gain in a sense of rewards, right? Because it can learn that pattern much better than, for example, the small, pattern in a small group. And that's why the biases can actually amplify it. And part of it is also going to the outcome of the system. So if there is a person kind of reading this decision from the system, often they don't have a clue like how the system actually get to the point of like, for example, decision is positive or negative. And because of this kind of like black box way of things, and we don't have the reasoning, explanation, interpretability of the models, that bias can also be amplified. So they don't have a clue like how to interpret, for example, probabilities from the system, and then it's going to be amplified. So it's kind of like in the brief way of saying that like how the biases can actually appear and how it can also amplify. And part of the issue is also we are designing the system that they are actually, when there is outcome, it's actually getting imported to the system as an input of the system. So it's actually kind of creating this kind of feedback loop that is also amplifying. So the bias of the system can actually amplify it more because the data is getting more biased. I hope it's answered your question.
Thank you, Gulmush. So, Monsieur, peut-être que vous pourriez aller voir Caroline à la toute fin de l'événement pour lui poser la question en privé. So we'll take the last question. Maybe do it briefly because we're running out of time and we want to make the conclusion remarks.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I'm not a scientist. I don't work in academia. My question is for you, Joshua. What do you think about social activism? And the reason why I ask this question is because I can't stop thinking about the climate change crisis we're in. And you're talking, let's say in 10 years from now, we're in the same room, nothing has happened. Google actually managed everything on AI, and we keep talking about governments doing something. So what's your personal view on social activism and civil disobedience when it comes to AI?
I think civil society has a huge role to play in making society move in a safer and better direction. And we need to have these kinds of discussions, not just among scholars, academics, researchers, scientists, but also much broadly deliberate with people from all horizons and without expertise. And it's going to be important for many reasons. It's important because they might be much more at risk, for example. It's also important because governments, especially in democratic countries, will be much more likely to react if it becomes a political issue in the minds of more people. So we need that kind of activism. Now, one thing I worry about is how do we do this in a way that isn't just playing on fear? Fear hasn't been helping the climate change debate so much. It may lead to paralysis, or it may lead to maybe extreme, reactions that don't necessarily help. So I don't know the answer to this, how to do this right. But I think we can take lessons from what happened with climate change.
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup à tous nos panélistes. Merci, Juliette. Avant de passer la parole à Lise Langlois pour les mots de clôture, j'aimerais remercier les équipes d'Ivado et de l'Obvia pour l'organisation conjointe de l'événement. Merci à Joshua pour ton input évident, pour ton leadership. Merci à l'équipe ici à MILA, notamment Laurence et Julien, qui ont travaillé extrêmement fort pour faire arriver cet événement, mais aussi à tout le monde. 2 messages avant de passer la parole à Lise Langlois pour le mot de clôture. If you are an AI scientist and you are in the room and you want to learn more about responsible AI and how, as a scientist, you can develop new tools, we have a program which is called Trail. And Solène over there at the end of the room, she is running the program at MILA. So you should go see her and subscribe to the program here at MILA. Donc, très important. Et deuxième élément, Juliette Powell, son livre sort demain. So your book is coming out tomorrow. So the AI Dilemma, 7 Principles of Responsible Technology. Merci d'avoir été là. Thanks for being here today. That was very nice. Maintenant, Lise Langlois, directrice générale de l'Obvia, pour les mots de la fin. Et à la fin de ces remarques, vous êtes libre de partir ou de parler ensemble. Merci beaucoup.
Excusez-moi. C'est pas facile de résumer vos propos. Alors, je m'excuse de ne pas mettre tout en valeur la richesse que vous avez faite. Je vais y aller en 1 minute. On m'a donné 1 minute pour faire la synthèse. Je voudrais souligner le fait... Oui, 3, OK, merci. Je trouvais que c'était un pari audacieux qui a été pris aujourd'hui. Puis il y a un mot que j'ai retenu au tout début de l'accueil de l'Observatoire, c'était le mot « humilité ». Parce qu'il faut faire preuve d'humilité pour se mettre à nu. Je trouve ici qu'on n'a pas toute la connaissance et le fait d'avouer avec beaucoup d'humilité, de courage, que voici l'état de la situation, voici ce que je pense, puis d'être en dialogue, bien, c'est ça. Je veux souligner le fait que c'est courageux parce que souvent les chercheurs, on va s'avancer, mais quand on est très, très sûr, on ne va pas commencer à s'avancer quand on est dans l'incertitude totale. Alors ici, je tiens à remercier les panélistes pour ça. Le point que je voudrais souligner concernant ce panel ici, ça a été souligné au tout début, l'importance de distinguer les différents risques parce que ça apporte beaucoup de clarté. Je trouve que quand on commence à catégoriser puis à distinguer les niveaux de risque, bien, ça aide ici. Puis ça a été fait d'entrée de jeu. Donc, ça, c'est important à mon avis parce que ça nous aide en même temps à bien agir parce que, comme on l'a souligné, nul ne peut savoir la trajectoire que prendra l'intelligence artificielle. Mais toutefois, les panélistes mettent de l'avant le momentum important dans lequel on se trouve. Certains disent historique, et qu'un choix politique est à faire pour être en mesure de choisir dans quelle société nous voulons vivre, une société qui, on l'a senti dans les propos, qui permettrait le débat public, du moins c'était un élément important. Est-ce qu'on veut augmenter la productivité à tout prix? Est-ce qu'on veut une IA au rabais, et aussi toute la question de pouvoir qui était sous-jacent aux interventions de chacun. Et bien entendu, la démocratie qui était en trame de fond, qui est ressortie comme étant une valeur importante et dans laquelle on sent qu'elle est menacée. Donc, il y avait ces réflexions-là. Puis ensuite, un autre élément qui a attiré mon attention, c'est le fait qu'on est en réflexion, c'est-à-dire qu'on voit qu'on passe d'une approche technocentrée à une approche technosociale, d'où l'importance justement de réfléchir à ce qu'on perd. Est-ce qu'on veut vraiment perdre? Et certains éléments auxquels la société a construit son histoire, mais aussi, à mon avis, est-ce qu'on veut réfléchir à ce que l'on tient? Et on devrait mettre ça plus en évidence. Donc, notre capacité de résister, de façonner, de négocier semble diminuer avec la société technocentrée. Donc, d'où l'importance que je sentais dans les propos des panélistes. Il y a des éléments qu'on perd, mais qu'on tient et qui ne sont pas assez mis en lumière. Autre élément aussi qui se dégage, que j'ai constaté, c'est toute la conception de l'être humain. À mon avis, on effleure ce débat. Il y a une conception de l'être humain qu'on sent, mais qui n'est pas dit. On est très timide dans notre manière de concevoir l'être humain et c'est un autre élément qui me semble important de revenir et qui pourrait orienter notre réflexion. il y avait Joshua dans sa présentation qui a dit s'il vous plaît, essayez de me convaincre que je ne dois pas m'inquiéter. J'ai retenu cette question-là. Je ne sais pas, Joshua, si tu es moins inquiet, mais ce qu'on peut voir, c'est qu'on est en dialogue, puis ce dialogue-là a besoin d'interdisciplinarité. Je crois que ça, c'est un verrou important. Un verrou, quand je dis verrou en termes de dialogue, c'est qu'on devrait vraiment exiger d'avoir l'interdisciplinarité. Et évidemment, je terminerai, parce que le temps file, que la réglementation, c'est important, mais on n'a pas parlé beaucoup d'éthique, un peu, on a touché un peu à l'éthique, mais pour moi, je trouvais que l'éthique était toujours en trame de fond, que ce soit par la présentation de Joshua quand il parlait qu'on a un problème d'alignement avec la société, avec les développeurs, etc. Mais il y avait aussi une question de valeur qui était sous-jacente dans cet alignement-là. C'est-à-dire qu'on mettait en évidence l'intention versus la conduite. Puis en éthique, ces deux éléments-là doivent être alignés. On utilise souvent ce mot de trajectoire éthique comme quoi c'est important. Alors, il y avait ce point-là qui ressortait en trame de fond, du moins dans la présentation de Joshua au tout début. Beaucoup de choses que j'ai notées vite avant de faire la conclusion, mais je voulais vraiment remercier les panélistes pour cette conversation qui, à mon avis, est une première et qui mérite d'être poursuivie par rapport à certains éléments que j'ai tenté de faire ressortir. Donc, merci à vous tous.
Merci tout le monde. L'événement est terminé.